Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining our June 27, 2024 School Board Workshop. Got some good topics on the docket today to jump into. Let's first start off with any public comments? No public comments to start, so let's jump into our first presentation, which is the proposed school district Manatee County SOAR Lab concept. So Dr. Wyson, did you want to start us off and then introduce who we have to present?
Thank you, Chairman and board members. Good morning. And the team, you can go ahead and come down and get set up. Board members, we want to show you a concept this morning, and this is the vision of Dr. Halpin, our early learning director, and a group that's been working on a concept that really supports the board's priority around on grade level reading by grade 3. And as we know, that all starts early. And so the purpose today is to have kind of an overview of the concept, give you an opportunity to ask questions, and then we'll talk broadly about next steps. This is not a project that there is a definite time frame for. Again, right now it's a concept. We do have a potential space, and we're working on what that means for budget and a lot of other considerations. But we wanted you to see it first so that we can begin to have some public conversation with other stakeholders. So we'll turn it over to Dr. Breslin, Dr. Halpin.
Good morning. Thank you all for having us. Thank you, Superintendent. Dr. Halpin needs no introduction, but she deserves one. She's such a fabulous champion for our early learners, and she's going to share this vision that we hope that you all will be as excited as we are about this, and I will let her get started.
Good morning, friends. We are excited to share with you our vision for a school district of Manatee County, SOAR 4 Lab. SOAR 4 is a free parenting program that promotes early literacy. The SOAR 4 community programs began 9 years ago as a pilot program to prepare early learners attending Seabreeze Elementary School for pre-K. This collaborative program is supported through philanthropy. SOAR 4 activates Title I parents to be their child's first literacy teacher. Parents learn how to read to their child, introduce new, rich vocabulary and skills, connects with community resources, and families receive free literacy materials. SOAR 4 provides families with early learners hands-on engaging literary experiences designed to increase oral language and vocabulary. SOAR 4 has grown over the 9 years to the point that we now provide a monthly family outreach at the Bishop Museum, SOAR 4 story time at local county libraries bi-monthly, SOAR 4 story walk, SOAR 4 giveaway libraries, and the SOAR 4 Bradenton Reads Banner Initiative. Monthly, SOAR 4 outreach touches over 1,000 families. The SOAR 4 Lab will leverage the success of SOAR 4. The SOAR Lab will create and foster engaging, impactful play experiences based on the Florida Early Learning and Developmental Standards for children, their families, and our staff so that we can all learn and thrive. The SOAR Lab will be an expansion of the SOAR programs and will support the early learning curriculum. We'd like to walk you through what our vision looks like. Our SOAR 4 School District Manatee County Lab will include an art space, a maker space, a block space, and an outdoor classroom with a sound and sensory garden with a storybook trail. We love this quote. Children who visit a museum during pre-kindergarten and kindergarten have higher achievement in reading, math, and science. This is one of the reasons why we continue to offer our Big SOAR program at the Bishop Museum. But unfortunately, we can only host that once a month. Therefore, we'd like to find a permanent location in addition to offering that monthly program. Our vision is aligned with our strategic plan. We want to continue to partner with community-based agencies. We want to expand the availability of relevant literacy training and materials for first-time families and parents. We want to improve access to our families And we want to be good stewards and manage our building and make sure that our buildings have productive and innovative activities going on for our families. Our vision. Your Soarin' 4 Lab will create fostering, impactful play experiences based upon the Florida Early Learning Developmental Standards for children, families, and staff to learn and to thrive. This would be an expansion of our already successful Soarin' 4 programs. This would have intentional learning environments, which will include new vocabulary and working memory skills. We will continue to activate parents in this area to support early literacy skills at home through the use of modeling, prompts, and questionings, which you've all seen demonstrated out in our Soarin' 4 programs. And we will continue to connect families to our school district in Manatee County and provide registration information for families in this location. Our vision to support academic growth for our littles. We would have hands-on learning. It would help support cognitive development. Of course, everything that Soarin' 4 does supports new language and literacy skills. We would incorporate math and science exploration. We would have sensory experiences, and of course, everything that we do would be to activate that parent to support their child's early literacy skills at home. That's what Soarin' 4 does best. This would expand classroom learning for our littles and for our staff. Currently, pre-K does not participate in any special area curriculum, so our teachers do that alone in the classroom. This would allow our pre-K children to take a field trip to actually experience the lab. This would provide real-world context for the standards and benchmarks that we're teaching. It would offer multi-sensory experiences and a deeper exploration of those standards and benchmarks that we focus on. And it would be interactive, focusing on critical thinking skills. This lab would explore accessibility and expand accessibility of the Soarin' 4 programs. Our use at the museum is only once a month. Our vision would also include, it would be a revitalization for our Title I neighborhoods. We would love this lab to be in the middle of our Title I elementary schools. We would have community conversations that would take place in this area to activate parents to become their child's first best literacy teacher. We would envision that the lab would have evening hours and some Saturday hours also for our families who aren't able to come to the big SOAR down at the Bishop Museum. So we would have flexible hours in this space. And it would be a collaborative space. We would invite our community partners to come in and to utilize this space also. We would have 4 areas of focus in our lab, focusing on art, a maker space, a block area, an outdoor classroom, which would include a sound and sensory garden, and the storybook trail. Our art area would be an art studio where students would be able to expand their creative vision while they discover new art forms. Visitors would be able to play and create while exploring open-ended creative materials and processes. And students would get to use new materials that they didn't get to utilize in their classroom. At the art studio, we would have progression of materials, such as we do at Soarin' 4. We would incorporate, we would hope, printmaking and painting, mixed media, fiber, clay, multimedia, and music into this studio area. We would love to have a maker space in this area where our littles would be having access to a workshop. They would get to use real materials and real tools in this area. Our vision would include repurposing all sorts of materials here, including cardboard, plastic food containers, fabrics, scraps of lumber, and broken toys. Taking things apart and putting them back together. That's one of the favorite areas of Soarin' 4 that we have, when we take in laptops and computers and the kids can tinker with that. Their families love that. So this would be a way for our littles to start to explore that engineering process. We would have an area that would focus on block play, magnets, and gears. When we were doing our research for what would be the next evolution of Soarin' 4, because we think we need to go deeper into the community and have something more systemic than that once-a-month Big SOAR program, we went and toured all different types of children's museums all over the country. And the one area that we found that was most readily accessible to the children and families is the block area. Soarin' Forward does provide Block Fest in collaboration with our Early Learning Coalition, but that's only once or twice a year. It's very cumbersome to be carrying all the big blocks. So we would envision a whole block area for our littles to play and to build. All math skills can be learned through block play. And we would have an outdoor classroom area. This would be a place where our teachers could go out. It would be a place that we would have a sensory garden that the children could walk through and our community could take ownership of. And we would also, of course, include a storybook trail. The reason we love to incorporate the music into this area is it would help to develop our fine and gross motor skills and working memory. Some of the exhibits that we've seen at children's museums are that the children are learning to play music actually on the outdoor equipment, which goes back to working memory, which is one of the skills that our children in the neighborhood that we're trying to target really, really need. It would introduce textures and colors and sculptures into this, and it would also be about movement and literacy, which is what our story time focuses on in the libraries. How do we attach literacy, nursery rhymes, and movement in a fun way for our families? The Soarin' 4 Lab would also have something that we call discovery kits. Right now in early learning, the Soarin' 4 program has purchased for our early learning classrooms something called family literacy kits. These are take-home kits that our families can check out. Our teachers have access to them, and they're based upon the standards and benchmarks that our children need to learn. So according to the child's proficiency in the classroom, if they are lacking in one of the skill areas, we have a kit designed for that. The families can check that kit out, play with the materials at home, see the language that they should be incorporating. We envision a whole wall of types of checkout kits for all the standards and benchmarks. We went down to the Fab Lab in Sarasota, and they have checkout kits. Of course, they're for older children, but it gave us the idea of where we could go to with this vision. We also worked with our county library system, and we developed something called early literacy kits for them. So this would be early literacy kits in addition to what they're offering. So if we saw a skill set that they weren't actually offering in their kits, we would be able to offer them in our kits. So families would have access in both places. Some additional considerations as we move on with this vision is the pre-Kers would have access to this building. Our vision would be that every child that's in one of our pre-K classrooms would have a field trip to this lab at least once a school year. That we would have it available for classroom field trips, that it would be open on evenings and weekends. We have to look, as Dr. Breslin and the superintendent has shared with us, the scope of renovation for a building for this to be in. And eventually, we would need staff for the lab. Right now, when we have a lab, we can start a soft opening with our staff, with the early learning team. I'm very happy to say the entire early learning leadership team is with me today, except for 3 members that I do want to acknowledge. Angela is at a TATS conference for us. Rose is back at the office, and Jody is at our ELF Center. Before we even started with this vision, I went to our leadership team and said, do you believe that we have the capacity to do this? Do you think that this is needed in our community, and will you support this? Every single one of them said yes. If they did not, I would not be here. But we have the support of our early learning leadership team to provide this to you. So then we get to what will Soarin' 4 contribute to this endeavor? So you know Soarin' 4 is supported through philanthropy. Soarin' 4 is saying that they will provide the engagement materials for the area. So the way that I think of this is the school district of Manatee County is providing the location, but Soarin' 4 is providing all of the engagement materials within that location. So we have the Ross camps here if you have any questions afterwards, but they're pledging a large amount of money to be able to purchase those materials with follow-up for 4 years after that, because we do know that there are going to be some consumable items that are in this. We know some things are going to be broken, and they're pledging their support for even after once we get the lab up and rolling. Our team is pledging to develop the standards-based engagements for not only the pre-Kers, but we also want families to come with the strollers and their infants and the toddlers. So we want to have engagements also for that birth to second or third grade. Our end result is that all children will be kindergarten ready. That's what we work for. But we also want all children to be reading proficiently by the end of third grade. So we want to make sure that we have engagements for all those age ranges. Our leadership team will create the discovery kits, working with what we've already done at the library. Soarin' 4 is pledging to support stipends for staff for after hours, for volunteers to go in, for our retired teachers to go in. They receive a stipend. That would all be through Soarin' 4. When we started the idea of how can we do more meaningful work for a longer duration other than the once a month, I had the pleasure of meeting Gordon Gillette. Gordon Gillette was the CEO of TICO, and he was the CEO of the Hillsborough ELC. He shared with me when he was a young executive at TICO, he had the pleasure of working with a few moms that wanted to start a children's museum. And as his outreach at TICO, he started to work with them. Well, their work started what we would be calling our Soarin' 4 lab in Tampa, and then it evolved into what we now know as the Glaciers Children's Museum in Tampa. So Gordon has been a great sounding board for us and is continuing to offer lessons learned from their evolution in Tampa. Soarin' 4 has offered to hire a museum consultant. How are we different from a children's museum? When you attend a children's museum with your child, learning could be unintentional. You go there for fun and the interaction. The difference with the Soarin' 4 lab is children are coming for fun, but learning will be intentional. Every single thing that we do is just like what we see happening in Soarin' 4. There's a reason that we're asking these questions, there's a reason for these prompts, and all of that goes back to school readiness. We would love the Soarin' 4 lab to be located in the midst of Title I elementary schools. Some of the feedback that we get from Soarin' 4 is that Soarin' 4 is offered only once a month, that Soarin' 4 is offered at the museum. Transportation is a barrier for some of our families. Soarin' 4 is offered on a Wednesday night, which is a church night for a lot of our families. This would resolve some of that. We would still be partners with our wonderful friends at the Bishop. We would still offer Big SOAR, but this would be in addition to that once a month programming. So collaboration matters, thinking outside of the classroom. This is a unique collaboration that will showcase Manatee County Schools and the Soarin' 4 program. This is a true investment in early learning. It would be transforming maybe some unused school space that we have right now, and it would be leveraging the success that we have already seen in our Soarin' 4 programs. And for us, it would be a great marketing tool for our school system. And secondly, it would be an opportunity for a neighborhood revitalization, that families in the neighborhood would be able to walk to this location and use it. Every museum that we toured and had conversations with, they shared with us that we would want something that would have a dual use, that it could be used for professional learning opportunities. It could be used for the community to come in and utilize that building also. So we would envision that open approach also. Everything that we would do in the SOAR lab would go back to increasing student achievement. We would love to provide on-site registration for our district schools and have information about how to register at this school. And it would go back to parent activation. Everything that Soarin' 4 does is to activate parents to be their child's first literacy teacher. And so that is what we would be doing in this area. The children would come in and have a great time, but they would be coming in with their parents. They would be coming in to work with their parents after hours. For our teachers, they would be coming in to see how to utilize materials in a deeper and different way than they're already doing it in the classroom. And as we like to say in early learning, we've taken the little ones from crayons to caps, that we have the end in mind with them graduating. Another thing I'd like to share is, of course, we would not be here if it was not for the ongoing support of the Ross camps. When we started this program 9 years ago, it was just us volunteering at the program. It was an idea, it was a thought, and just how can we help parents to better prepare their preschoolers for pre-K. And it was so well received. As we've evolved the Soaring 4 program, we continue to track data to make sure that the children are being supported. We're seeing the best gains that we've ever had in our early learning classrooms. 93% of our children in our VPK classrooms, in your VPK classrooms, met or exceeded benchmark standards for this year, which is amazing. Of course, that's attributed first off to the teachers in the classroom, but secondly, it's attributed to your leadership team that provides support to those teachers in the classroom. And the third piece of that, which is a very important piece of it, is that these children who are now entering kindergarten that have come through our pre-Ks have always had access to Soaring 4. They've had access to come to our programs. But I would not be sitting here if we did not have a third-party evaluator come in and look at the Soaring 4 program. For the Ross camps to say that they wanted to continue supporting this program. They weren't in it for 1 year. We're in our 9th year now of support, but we had results first come in. And because if what we're doing is not meaningful and impactful, there's no reason for us to be here. So they invested, a third party came in and researched Soaring 4, met with us, but more importantly, surveyed our parents, went out and met with our parents and said, are you utilizing the materials that you're being given at Soaring 4? Do you know how to support your child's literacy skills at home because of what you learned at Soaring 4? And collectively, the answers were yes. So Soaring 4 has been a great program, but now we have the capacity to say to you and to say to the community, our parents have verified that the results that we're getting are not haphazard. They're strategic because of the work that we're doing. So we don't serve all families in Soaring 4. This would be a way for us to collectively do the good work that we're doing in a more routine way and in a deeper way than we're able to do at our once a month set it up at the Bishop Museum. So that's our Soaring 4 vision. We hope that you can see the need for us to have a building, to have a space of our own, that we can go deeper and create better relationships with our families to ensure that all children are ready and prepared, not only for pre-K, but for kindergarten. If you have any questions, we're here to answer them. The Ross camps are here if you have any questions.
Thank you very much, Dr. Halpin. Quick question for the superintendent. Do we, and Dr. Halpin, to whichever one, do we have a place in mind? Because one of my questions is going to be that, and I have some thoughts, but.
So Chairman, we do, and when Dr. Halpin brought the concept to me, we jumped right into some conversation about space planning, and one of the locations that we looked at is we have a small vacant building at Harlee, and we had an opportunity to go over there and tour that building with this specific concept in mind. Mr. Rinaldi, Mr. Jensen, Mr. Clark, Dr. Breslin, Dr. Halpin, and the Ross camps joined us as well. So we were able to stand in the middle of the facility, talk about the vision for the work, and we felt like that was a good spot where we're not currently, where we've got space available in proximity to schools. Obviously, if that's the ultimate location, there's renovation work that needs to be done. There's infrastructure work that needs to be done. But we can see it being a good fit at that location.
Okay, thank you. So, couple questions that I have. I mean, I think that's a great space that we're obviously not utilizing and we can utilize. Looking at the map, it runs kind of, it's the southern part of that central corridor, but it's it's there, obviously very close to Able and Bayshore. Another thought about location. I'm not saying this has got to be it, but I was with Mayor Brown yesterday at the Chamber Board of Directors meeting, and they will be starting their city park next summer, groundbreaking, building the building there. And if you're not familiar with the city park, it's going to be right next to Lecom. Almost said McKechnie, on 13th Avenue, right next to Rogers Gardens Elementary. And so, could that be a place that we incorporate? Maybe not a full. Maybe the Harley building is better for the full lab, but is there something that we could potentially do, because that is dead center of Ballard, Samoset, Johnson. I mean, it's dead center corridor. So just a thought. The other thought I had, and again, I love that you began with, can we do this? Do we have the capacity to do this? Because it's an unbelievable idea. I don't know anyone who's going to say, well, I can't talk for everybody, but I guess I don't know anyone who, I would never imagine somebody like, oh, I don't know if I like this idea. It's just doing it right and making sure that we do it right, because I think it's going to touch many, many kids' lives. So I'm glad that you thought about the capacity first. And so maybe two places could be potentially possible in a smaller scale, where the city park's going to go, and the main, the big ones at Harley. One of the questions I had was for funding. Obviously, thanks to Ross Hands, we've got that. But my question is, we're about to later on in this workshop talk about legislative priorities, and I'm sure we'll have some appropriation asks. So this is one of the number one priorities for the board is early learning. So do we have a figure that, and maybe we're not even there yet, but do we have a price of renovation? What would 4 years look like, so that we could potentially ask legislature for appropriations, and on top of what the Ross Camps are willing to do, which is fantastic. And now instead of 4, it's 8 years maybe. You know what I mean? And now that there's some even more longevity there. So I don't even know if we've looked at that pricing yet.
Mr. Rinaldi and his team have done some work in that area, and obviously there are multiple ways to do this, and that's again why I wanted to have this conversation today, because we could rush the concept to completion on a smaller budget, right? Or we can talk about all the different stakeholders and funding avenues, which might take us a little bit longer to launch the concept, but we might end up with a better and more flexible facility product at the end. So it really just depends on kind of what route we want to go down. And again, we looked at that Harley space. We think it works well. But to your point, Chairman, now that we're having a public conversation, an even better opportunity may arise. I just didn't want to start having those conversations and catch any of you off guard, since this is the only venue in which we can all talk together as a group. So yes, ultimately, we could attach a dollar value. It would just depend on whether we're doing a fast implementation on a lower budget, or a little bit slower implementation where we raise a little bit more revenue, and then maybe do some of the more higher end touches or whatever, so that you've got a more durable facility. I hope that makes sense. I mean, there's the higher budget and the lower budget, and neither is a luxury. It's just a matter of how you do it, how you prioritize.
And the physical building is there, so it's not.
Yes.
So there's not that.
Right.
that amount of
There's-
cost.
There's
build
some,
something.
yes, I think specifically there's some HVAC infrastructure that's got to be addressed regardless of whether we use the space for this project or something else. So that's kind of a fixed cost to using that space for anything. And then it's just a matter of the layout. So like if we went over there and took a tour today, Dr. Halpin knows which walls internally need to go away so that we end up with 3 distinct lab spaces as she's described. But how you do that, and again, some of the equipment finishes and everything else changes the price of the project. So again, I think it just comes down to we first wanted to see the board's level of interest in the project, and then talk about potential funding sources. This is, and I'll defer to Ms. Sellers on all the details, but because this is an early learning project, not every capital funding source is available to us here, but we do have some options.
Okay. I mean, I know I'm asking almost the same question, but is there a range of like 200,000 was the cheap, 750 was the high, $1 million was the high?
I think we probably need, I think if that was our best space that we wanted,
Yeah.
I think we'd be looking at 600,000 on the low end and high sixes getting near $1 million on the high end.
Okay,
So somewhere
perfect,
in there.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you. That's all I have. Board members, anything?
Yeah.
We'll just go around the bend here.
I agree. It sounds like a great idea, so thank you for coming up with it and bringing it to us. I think about children's museums, and I have 2 little ones, so we love children's museums, but there is a cost to them. And so I love the idea of families being able to use this, specifically Title I families, because even a lot of those museums do offer a discounted price if you meet a certain financial threshold. But there's a lot of families, like we talk about the Alice families, right, that are in that gap where that's cost prohibitive, paying $20 a person to go to the Glazer Children Museum, but you aren't low enough to hit that threshold to get it for the $3 or whatever it is. So there's that gap that this would really service that is so nice, and that's exciting. I guess my biggest concern would be transportation, which you did say, just because, there's a lot of Title I families that don't have reliable transportation. They either don't have a car, or they do, but it's not very good, or, there's a lot of transportation issues, and I guess I would be curious to know what else could be done. Yes, when there's a field trip, right, there's a bus. But I wonder how, and this is not something we decided today, but how else to cure that? Because the families that you'd want to use it the most, that's still going to be a barrier, and even different times. The different times I think will help. I do agree with that, because their car may not be accessible to them for some reason during a certain time, but then could be a different time. So I can see value in that, but that to me, I think is just, that's a big barrier to overcome, and that will be hard.
Yes. What we have found with Soarin' 4 is that families that have access to transportation are able to figure something out to get there once a month.
Mm-hmm.
So we're hoping that the additional hours and the different days will help. One of the reasons why the Harley campus is so appealing to us is because Daughtry's a walking community.
Yes.
So Daughtry's 2 blocks away. We have Able that is a few blocks away. We have Canaan, we have Oneiko, and we have Bayshore, which is right there. We've also talked, as Mr. Choate brought up, once this is a success, growing this to another location, because we are very aware that we have students across the river, and what does that look like? But we need to start somewhere, and we thought this would give us access to a lot of families that we're trying to reach right now, and leave things within our control. We want to be a partner. Soarin' 4 wants to be a partner with the Manatee County School District. So this is a building that's being underutilized right now. There's nobody in it. As the superintendent shared there, regardless of who goes in it, there are some issues that need to be corrected on the building. But this would give us access to the families that we're trying to get to right now so that we can see it, live in it, see what needs to be tweaked before we go on to another location.
I also really love the idea of kindergarten registration. I know you said student registration, but I hear kindergarten registration when you say that, because especially, once again, Title I families, that's how I got my first job. I told Dr. Weiss on that at my last board briefing, like, they're not always aware of when school starts. And then they all come when they start seeing buses show up in their neighborhood. And then you have this large influx of kindergarten students. And so having something where you can put out a sign and say, have you signed up your child for, like, man, would that be nice?
Yes, and remember, our Soaring 4 teachers are your school district teachers. So it's not only that we might have a sign up, that you're actually meeting the kindergarten teachers that are getting a stipend from Soaring 4 to be there to get them excited, because now you're actually meeting your teacher all summer that you're going to have when you start school in the fall.
Right, I agree with you. And even if it wasn't your own teacher, right, there's an excitement of, and these are the teachers, and look how awesome they are, right? Like, you can get excited about that, which I think most kindergartners are excited, right? But that would add, I think that's a really smart idea, just because it will really inform families, like, no, now is the time. Don't wait until the middle of August, and we're trying to plan now, so come on down, right? There was one other thing you talked about, parent engagement, and I once again go back to, like, when I go to children's museums, and I like to do all the things with my kids, but I've watched a lot of parents that sit there on a bench on their cell phone. So I guess my question is, and this is really more of something like in the future, but how does that get, because the parent working with the child so that the parent can continue to do those behaviors, like, that's the whole point.
Yes.
And to engage the parent instead of them sitting there on their phone thinking, oh, my kid just gets to play in the makerspace, go make whatever you want, make a robot out of cardboard, cool. Like, but like, instead of helping your child, like, let's make a robot, that's a great, you know what I mean? How you change that,
So we've had success with that. So when we send our retired teachers out to do story time for us, the best example I can give is we ask them to go out and do work at our teenage parent program. And the first time we went out, there was no engagement. The littles were here, and moms were on their phone, and I thought, oh, this is not a good investment of our Soaring 4 funds. But we worked with them, and it's conversations, and it's the prompting. And 3 weeks later, we had no phones, and we had a dad in the program.
like it.
So it goes back to the modeling. We envision sentence stems on the wall, because sometimes as a parent, you don't even know what questions to ask. So we envision these beautiful sentence stems. So even if you're not able to think of a question at the time, we already have the prompts available for you. But it all goes back to the modeling too. That's why staff is going to be so important in this area. It's to bring the parent in and go deeper than what we do at Soaring 4. So at Soaring 4, we're explaining to the parents how to utilize the materials. Through our results first, we know that they are utilizing the materials, but how much better we will be when we're able to actually model in real time with those same materials in a deeper way and have the family participate. So we already have a sign that we found, like no cell phone zone or one of those type of things other than pictures. When we do Block Fest, that's one of the things. But we see the parents getting down on the floor. So it is a paradigm shift for our parents, that it is different than a children's museum. This is a lab. We want you to be involved and interactive in this experience.
Yeah, I agree with you. Like, framing it in a way so that when you enter this building, you know that this is the expectation, and it is different, because, I mean, to me, like, children's museums are fun for everybody, but I know what I've seen. So I love that. I love that, because that would be something that would be a continual thing. I mean, as you have families come, and but I think it's a great idea. My predecessor Bob Gauze had this saying that, and it's a pretty famous saying: do you want it done right? Do you want it done fast? Or do you want it done cheap? And you can only pick two, and so you can't pick all three. So for me, I guess I'd prefer that it's done right. Just because I can really see this becoming something that would be truly beneficial to the community and specifically to the students. So if that's where we have to decide, then that would be my decision, is take a little bit more time. If that means different funding or whatever, that's fine. I like your idea if we can talk the legislature into doing that. I would lean more towards saying, okay, if it takes a little bit longer, but it has the necessary bones that, and the equipment that would be appropriate, then that's, to me, worth the extra time to raise those funds the right way. So thank you. I really appreciate this.
Thank you.
Ms. Burr?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Glad to have you here.
Thank you.
When I got on this board, that was my primary goal, pre-K through 3. So this concept is very appealing to me. I didn't see Rogers on here, but I'm guessing it's in here on your map of Title I schools. But I'm like, okay, am I misreading it, or is it overlapped somewhere? The whole concept is extremely appealing. Coming from a lifestyle that I came up in, I didn't know what a museum was, kindergarten, none of those things. So this is something that I feel is essential to some Title I families. We have kids that are transit that goes through our community that may not know, and my first walk through, I think Ballard and Rogers was and I think I talked to you, Ms. Bresson, about this, students coming in and not even knowing how to hold a pencil into their kindergarten class. And that was disturbing to me. I'm like, oh my goodness, these teachers are not only trying to teach a student how to hold a pencil, but they're also trying to teach them classroom etiquette, which is, to me, a huge problem with kids that come in that have nothing. And so I like the idea with all of the little block building and the arts and all of that, but I'm more in the reading and the phonics and the words on the wall and a picture of what that word is, and then the sentence, and one word at a time. The red block, the red block, here you are, kind of concept. That individual interaction with the child and getting that parent's involvement. To Ms. Messenger's point, when I went to Soaring 4, I saw parents on their phones while the kids were running around and going from station to station to station and grabbing all of the little kids. That was probably one thing I was real surprised about, how there was not enough adult child interaction. It was more just go and grab. Some were not, but there was some that did. So I like the idea of the lab concept, but I'm on the side of caution. Okay, we have to be very strategic in how we roll this out, where it's rolled out, and the expectation of who comes. And that would be marketing. We want you to interact with your child because education is the center stone of life. I mean, it is. You got to read to succeed. And if you can't read to succeed, then you're going to be left behind. And that's the one thing I don't like, is the child is left behind. So I don't know. That was my first question, was when I saw this on the agenda. Multiple funding sources, okay. We've gotten acclimated to that, but what is that dollar amount? We don't know what that dollar amount is. I appreciate the Ross Camps being here and being so supportive of our community and a reading. You know, all of the stuff in here, a lot of the arts things, I get that, but mine is reading, writing, and math, and incorporating a writing lab and that reading in there, and I know it's littles, very littles even, so, but showing them how to hold that pencil by using art project
Correct.
would get them there.
Yes, so holding that paintbrush is
Right.
how we actually start to get their shoulders and their hands ready to hold the pencil. So that's why I was talking about the progression in the art studio of the material. So you start with the bigger and then you move to the smaller. But every single thing that we're doing would be to get that child ready for that next classroom, whatever classroom that would be.
Okay. And to Mr. Choate's idea of having something very centrally located, maybe your contacts, you can get them to buy into, I mean, surely there's something in central downtown that could be utilized for something like this, whether it's a building that, or even just a lot. There's some lots that we could probably get a hold of maybe and have some people donate the materials to have a building built. But I like this concept a lot. It's all about the marketing, steady and slow as you go. You've seen that with the 9 years of the history with Soaring 4, how it's progressed and progressed even more and more and got bigger and bigger and bigger. The reason you're successful is because you did it slow and steady, methodically, and interacted with the kids and the parents, because that's really what it's about. If you don't have that collaboration with that parent, you know, we're never going to get them up to the P3 performance at, you know, third grade being at level 3, 4, and 5 instead of 1 and 2. And that's, Dr. Weissong, no, that's been my biggest thing, is looking at those reading results and the math results. And if this is what it takes to get there with partners, then I'm totally there. And if we can get some money from our legislators, our local community with other partners, including us, it's all buy-in. To be honest, it's all a buy-in. And we get those kids from, you know, diapers to gowns, you know, to graduation, and then on to MTC and all the other places we have. I think it's a great idea. Of course, everything with a great idea comes with a cost. So I'm on the side of caution of how much is it really going to cost us if we have a location to do that first site. I have not been to that building. I wish I had been able to go to that building, but I don't even know where it's at. I haven't been through there. That would be the other thing. But, you know, we have places I think that we could probably utilize. You know, space is always at a premium per square foot even. And then the maintaining that square foot is quite costly, as Mr. Rinaldi can tell us. So. But yeah, I'm excited about this. When I started looking through that deck, I'm like, oh wow, actually a lab would kind of be like our little mini mosaic, like Tampa has that little museum with the big dinosaurs in it, mosaic. Isn't that Mosey, that's it. It's kind of like that in a smaller scale.
Mosey's closed now.
Mosey, is it closed now?
No, but it's like just like a quarter of the size it was when we were
Go
kids.
by the, yeah.
Yeah, I took my grandkids there many, many times, and this is what.
We don't want Soaring 4 to close.
No. This is what that kind of reminds me of. Kind of like a little mini Mosey museum,
Yeah.
but more geared around.
Learning.
Right. exactly. Okay.
Ms. Foreman?
Hi. Thank you for your presentation. You are always so inspiring.
Oh, thank you, Ms. Morris.
It's a wonderful program.
Thank you.
And Mr. and Mrs. Roskamp, wow, this community owes you a huge, huge thank you. You guys are just amazing, and I just want to personally thank you. I apologize for being late, so I may have missed answers to some early basic questions. One is the hours, because obviously you got working parents who can't get there during the day. Is this going to be evening only?
No, it would be flexible hours. So our vision would be that the children receive transportation to come for a field trip. So it would be open some days during the day. But we envision nights and we envision Saturdays for part of the day, and then over summer programming. So it would be open during that time in the evenings and in the day.
But according to the deck, the field trips are going to be pre-K only?
For us, it would be pre-K only, but of course, if other grade levels wanted to come and visit, we could discuss that. But I am responsible for the early learning classrooms.
So if the district's kindergarten and at first, and actually all of the early grades
I
would
would
benefit.
welcome them all.
So that would be a means of support for you?
I don't know that it would be a means of support, but they're more than welcome to explore the area and come in and engage.
Yeah, so. Because,
Even our extended day programs, we would love our after-school programs to have access to this also.
yeah, okay. And I believe the Sarasota Children's Museum closed, right?
It did. So it was a wonderful
This would be a resource.
museum that my son had grown up in, the Gee Whiz program. There actually is movement in the community for another children's museum in either Manatee County or in Sarasota. We're in conversations with them because we would be complementary to each other, but we would be different. As I shared earlier, and we're in agreement with Ms. Spray, our goal is academic achievement, preparing children for kindergarten, pre-K. The museum would be a fun place for our kids to go to. So there are conversations about starting another children's museum. Of course, they have to have a capital campaign. So even though they have traction and they've talked to the foundations, it might be something that's quite a few years out. We don't envision being that. Our engagement areas would all go back to academic achievement, so it's something that we think we could set up pretty quickly once we had that space.
Okay. And when would you anticipate all goes well, money comes through, when would you anticipate starting this?
Oh, if we had a magic wand, we'd love to be open in the fall, but that won't happen.
That's ambitious.
But as soon as we could be open, that's why the Roskamps have generously offered to hire a museum consultant for us. We've traveled through many states, as I said, looking at different children's museums with the lens of academic achievement. So we already know that there are certain things that we want to incorporate in this, but we've never purchased these type of things before. It's not what you would standard process for a school district. So that's where this consultant will help us, working with other museums, maybe exhibits that they're no longer using, we could purchase for this. So that ordering and purchasing piece of it would be done by the Roskamps and the Soarin' 4 Fund through the Manatee Education Foundation. Before we even brought this concept to you, we had conversations with Mary Glass in the Manatee Education Foundation, who has been a supporter of Soarin' 4 for the last 9 years, because she makes everything so easy for the Soarin' 4 program. And she said she is wholeheartedly in support of this. And would be willing to help with any of the ordering of the supplies and getting everything in process for that. So I think once the construction pieces are finished, we're ready on the other side with the materials and the concepts.
Okay. So really all that you want from us is to provide the space and then back off and let you do your thing.
Well, we're always...
You know, to be, we, you know, the district, we don't know, we cannot run what you're running, you know, or even guide you on it. You don't need the guidance, so, but sounds like.
But we always love input. It's always good to hear your opinions and your insight, because you have children, you have grandchildren, so and we all have our own stories of where we're from. So we want to make sure that this area is accessible to all. The other big piece of this is you touch so many families. That you're talking to the families and saying, are you going to a Soaring 4 program? Have you heard about the Soaring 4 lab? So you're communicating and promoting this out in the district, out in our community, out throughout our county will be extremely beneficial. Just hearing the affirmation from the ones that have spoken so far about your support for the concept is invigorating for us.
And what role, if any, will the county library system have in this?
I don't know that they would have any input just sitting here. Of course, we want to invite our community partners to come in. So maybe that is one of their librarians coming in and reading at a story time for us. Where I want to make sure is the kits that we developed for them for their early literacy kits, that our families have access through a county library card. We don't want to replicate the concepts and the standards that we've already built for. So for our checkout libraries materials, we'd want to make sure that they complement, they don't replicate.
When we had the storybook trail, was the trail or the banners?
The
down?
banners,
Yeah.
Bennington reads.
I talked with someone who told me about a children's library that I had never heard of that's downtown. You know what I'm talking about?
The little Discovery Center.
Oh, the little, yes. So funny how things are. Many years ago, the county had offered that space to us to start a Soaring 4 lab. And for whatever reasons, it didn't transpire. But that was the first space that was actually looked at when we started to think, oh my gosh, we need a permanent location. Physically, the physicality of Soaring 4 is immense. I mean, moving all of the materials into the museum, moving everything out, in addition to wanting to go deeper with the families. So yes, the Little Discovery Center is about 2 blocks away from Central Library. It's a little space for littles. 0 to 4 is what they target, but of course anybody can go into it since it's a county library. But we send our retired teachers in there to do a story time bi-monthly. And we are capped at capacity. That's the other thing that's happening at our story times. We've grown so much. When Dr. Breslin came to our first story time, we had 3 parents. You know, when Mr. Jensen came, we probably had 15 parents. Now we're upwards of 70 to 80, to the point that the libraries are saying we can't have any more because we have toddlers and infants everywhere. So that's one of the barriers at that Little Discovery Center when we send in the retired teachers, is just the capacity for that small of a space. But it's a great place for our early learning families to go to and have access. It's close, it's like we're saying, it's close to Rogers, very, very close to our Ballard families.
I'm just throwing that out as a possible resource, or, you know, that the county perhaps, or the friends of the libraries would.
Yes, we love the friends at the library.
Yes, would participate in.
Love that idea.
You know, take the burden off the Ross camps.
Yeah.
A little bit, so. Yeah. One of the first facility that I thought of when, and it was Wakeland. I don't know if, because I know there's empty room in there, you know, but just throwing that out. But you all can figure that out. Now, if we went to the state for money to do it right, as opposed to, obviously, it would not be doing it fast. And there's a chance that they would turn us down. Do we have a plan B?
Well, I think there are multiple options to explore. But again, we didn't want to get out in front of the board in terms of a lot of meetings on this project and then have you all hear about it, you know, through third parties. I do think there may be other foundations that would be interested in this project. There are a number of competitive grants that are out there, some that are research-based, others that fund projects, that are based on community need. And I think we could, given Dr. Halpin's vision and the one location, I think we could develop a compelling narrative. I think there could be other private donors interested in the project once we start those conversations. So it's just a matter of ultimately making a decision about how to do that. I mean, we also could just commit district funds to get the project moving faster. But that's why I wanted the board to hear the concept and hear about your interest. And I agree with the chairman's earlier comment that, I mean, the project is so compelling that I didn't expect any of you to say, I don't believe we should do this. This is one of these, and we've talked about this before. If we want to do this, this will be a priority, right? It'll be a priority initiative under early learning and literacy. And it means we may say no to some other ideas or projects down the road because we really want to get this one right. And I think, again, just doing the facility tour, and Dr. Halpin, of course, prepped even the empty building well with pictures of what things would look like. And Vice Chair, you're right. I think if you had gotten to see that, you would see there's literacy embedded in all three of those rooms. Because you better believe there are going to be letters and numbers on those blocks in that block lab, right? So some of it is exposure through play. And to Ms. Messenger's point, when the concept was pitched, I thought about a similar experience I had, I think, in Savannah with my son at a play and exploration location that he really enjoyed, and thinking about how many children don't have that opportunity at different ages. So I'm very excited about the project. And again, I think we could just choose to use existing resources, but then we will say no to other projects or other concepts because we did that. But I do think it's an attractive project. You are right, Ms. Foreman, that if it's a board legislative priority and we do the state ask, we won't have an answer until likely next June. Mm-hmm. And in the meantime, we'd be talking to foundations and writing grants. And that may be a slower timetable than we're willing to do, I think, given how visionary and exciting the concept is. So it's just to me, it's just a matter of making a decision about priorities.
Fabulous.
Thank you.
I would like to see it done fast.
Right.
Mr. Tatum?
Morning, Dr. Halpin.
Good morning.
And your staff, and the Ross camps. So yes, who wouldn't be on board with this?
Thank you.
I'm actually more in favor of getting it done fast, and I was sitting here pondering. I like to come up with analogies. I think it helps people understand things. So I mean, let's say that we wanted to improve the health of our workforce, and we said, well, we need a gymnasium because we want people to be able to go work out. And we could say, well, we'll wait, we'll see if we can get some funding and build a really nice gym, and maybe the legislature will roll in and give us some money, and a year and a half or 2 years from now, we'll have a really nice gym. But people need to start working out now. So I'm more in the favor of, is it Harley that we're looking at? Is it the building that was the lower Horizon, where Horizon's lower was?
Access building.
Okay, because I've been in there. I used to do the felt deliveries there, so I actually got it. And when it was open, I got a tour there one time. And I was looking at it here on Google Maps. I would be in favor of getting it going, and and then and actually it looks like there's actually some room on that property maybe to expand if we needed more room, and then we get it going for 3 or 4 years, and then maybe we move it if it really takes off, or we have a second center. So I kind of like that analogy. If people need to start working out and we need a gym, we should do an acceptable gym now, and then maybe envision a better gym later. But we need to get the gym going now because people need to work out. So if these young families and kids need this concept now, let's figure out a way to get going. Maybe shoot for like the beginning of 2025, at the beginning of the second semester of the school year, and then that would be what I would look for, and then judgment has to be used there. We obviously want it done quote unquote right, but right, what does right mean? That's a judgment decision, just like the gym analogy. You know, you could have a big Olympic-sized pool in a gym, but do you really need the Olympic-sized pool to get people working out? So I would be in favor of right and fast and using existing facilities that we have, and like putting a date down on the calendar, 1 January of 25, and getting her done. But that's one opinion out of 5. So that's all I have to say about that. And thank you to the Ross Camps for rolling in on this. We appreciate it. That's all I have. You're welcome. That's all I have to say. Thanks.
No, I agree. I think that we could, like Dr. Weissong said, I mean, we could front the building, etc. Still go after, whether it be from foundations, personal donations, the legislature. We can front the capital and then get paid back from those things. And so, and if we're going to start it now, we're going to do it now, and we've got a commitment for 4 years. You know, my thought again is this is something that for if we go to the legislature, it's like we've got matches, we've got our own skin in the game, the building, etc. We want this to be guaranteed for the next 8 years or 10 years, whatever that number is. But I agree. I mean, I think it's needed, and I think it'd be extremely successful. So let's keep it going. Keep the momentum going. Let's you know, sometimes, and I know this won't happen with y'all, and I know with the support you have, you get ideas, and then it kind of dies and fizzles a little bit, and your cans kick down. I know it won't happen. So bug us if you need to, and yeah, I love it. So yeah.
I'd like to see the site. I'd like to sometime go down there and look.
Yeah.
I would love that.
Thank you very
Yeah, thank you. Thank y'all. Appreciate it.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
And to the Ross Camps, thank you.
All right, we're going to move to our second item of the day, which is school board policies, the amendments to those. And I know Mr. Chapman is coming down to help with that. Anything you want to add to this, Dr. Weissong, before we get started? Just jump to Mr. Chapman.
Well, this is I think two batches of policies that we combined into one, and these almost all of these updates are recommended by Neola, your vendor for policy advisement. We may have some staff initiated or staff ideas about policy this fall, but for the most part, these are regulatory in nature. So I'll let Mr. Chapman walk you through them.
Thank you, Dr. Weissong. Thank you, board. No one ever says good morning to Mr. Dye, so good morning, Mr. Dye. Yeah. And,
He's a nice guy.
Mrs. Foreman said that the last presentation was inspiring. I don't know if reviewing board policies is that inspiring, but maybe so. But like Dr. Weissong said, this is a large batch of policies. Again, Neola is our vendor for this, and as you know, we spend the spring and summer working with Neola as the State Board of Education takes what's passed in the legislature, and then the State Board of Education then makes the rulemaking, and then thus the policies get sent to school districts. So essentially, this is what you have in front of you. They're labeled. There's a couple labels to them, but I'll start with the part 1, which is the policy 1210, 3210, and 4210 page, and I'll just kind of run through them all, and then I'll, obviously then hear from you all with suggested edits. So policies 1210, 3210, and 42, and I should just mention too, I don't know if I ever mentioned this, but for the public watching, these are all on our district website. If you go to our district website, www.manateeschools.net, there's a tab labeled District. You press on District, and then you'll see policies. Click on that. It takes you right to our policies, and then from there, they're split up in different sections. It's kind of pretty easy to navigate. But so policies 1210, 3210, and 4210 is our standards of ethical conduct policies. You've seen similar edits to these as the legislature passes some of these issues about sexual orientation, bathrooms, so on and so forth. So you're seeing those edits made in these policies, again, following a rulemaking, legislature, and then obviously a rulemaking and following a new state statute. On policy 2120, our school improvement policy, there's a minor edit to that, again, following new rulemaking. Policies, you kind of rarely see this, but when Neola suggests rescinding policies, but we have a lot of policies here, and it was recommended that we kind of make them more concise and make them into two policies on our weapons policy. So we're taking 1217, 3217, and 4217, and essentially rescinding those, revising 5772, and then adding a new one under 7217. The reason is the 5,000 series of policies is for students, and then the 7,000 series is for operations. And we can potentially go back to that one because I know we've had some public input on that. 7540 technology and 7540.04 is our own updates. It's just some minor updates there just to kind of clean up some and just kind of make sure that they're up to date when it comes to our technology policy, and just some titles in there. 8305 information security is an update on there from the recent rulemaking about making sure that we're protecting student data. And then 8405 is our school safety and security. And again, this is editing that threat management as the legislature keeps kind of refining our threat management model that we're working so hard on. And then we have the next set, and then I'll stop. But the next set is titled the 1242, 3242, and 4242 professional learning. Seems like every year we update these as again changes are made. So these again are updates following two rulemakings, some fairly straightforward edits there. 1362, 3362, 4362, and 5517.01 is updating all of those policies. Those are our anti-harassment policies, and they're kind of updating the bullying references and definitions there in those policies. In 2210, our curriculum development is just kind of updating the section about the SERP, which is our comprehensive evidence-based reading plan. And then 2271, our articulation and access to the Florida college system. Again, just adding a reference to a rulemaking by changing the name of a grant program. 8330 is student records. Again, a minor edit there from a rulemaking. 8600 is our big transportation policy. A reference there to the school bus infraction detection system, which you've heard a little bit about, but I know Mr. Rinaldi's team, we're kind of working on that. That's the, when the armband goes out, and we're kind of obviously working on that. So there's a sentence there adding from the rulemaking. 8600.04 was updated based on us because we're updating our safe driver plan. So we wanted to add a reference to that. And then 8651 is our board-owned or leased vehicle policy. Again, adding a reference to our safe driver plan, and also, if you remember, a few years ago, we've added a leased vehicle program, so we wanted to just update that. So that's your batch of policies. Again, you all approved these to be advertised 2 days ago, so they are out for public comment. There'll be a public hearing on these. From now until the public hearing, we accept public comment on these policies. There'll be a public hearing on these policies on the July 30th special meeting, and then we look for you all to approve these policies. So I'll stop there and take your comments and edits and suggestions.
Thanks. Anyone want to start? Board member? Anything?
Okay, I'll start.
Yeah, Ms. Foreman?
Start with 1210,
Yes.
page 1, number A5. We change, the policy changes A6, number 6, on page 103, from kindergarten to pre-kindergarten. But I think number 5 probably should change it also, or is that redundant and should just be deleted? Because I noticed, I think it was
Okay.
on a later policy,
That's,
later version of that was not there.
yeah, that's a good question. I'll look into that, Mrs.
Okay,
Foreman.
all right. Page 2 of that same policy, the, okay, this one, perhaps it enters the procedure field, but the fact that we have a policy that says that an administrator, does this give an administrator the ability to reasonably determine that notifying the parent would result in abuse, abandonment, or neglect? I would think that we would need some really strong guardrails around that. So that if an administrator feels that there could be an issue, for that administrator to take it to the next levels and to, you don't want one person making that decision. At least I don't.
Yes, I'll lean on Dr. Weissong here, but we are all bound by, if we believe there is abuse, neglect, or abandonment going on, we have the duty to report it at no matter what, and we are protected by that. So
Happening. So if an administrator wants to prevent that, or to say, I'm afraid that this would happen, so therefore I'm not going to notify the parent, this gives them the ability to do that.
Ms. Foreman, I agree with you. I think we could resolve that with an administrative procedure. I think thinking through the rare circumstance where that would be necessary, I think the vast majority of our administrators would be consulting with an executive director anyway, so we can take a follow-up note to just create a procedure that that spells out that process.
So that everyone is aware there's a procedure, perhaps a
Yes,
referral to it in here?
Yeah, we would just go over that with principals and assistant principals.
You would, but a future superintendent or a future, it could fall through the cracks if it's not policy. So,
I think the policy is articulating the exception that's in the statute. I'd be concerned about writing that specific expectation into policy, because sometimes there are emergency circumstances and a principal has to make a decision, but I think typically a principal in that situation would likely consult the executive director anyway. And so we could clearly articulate, or I can clearly articulate that expectation.
I'm just throwing that out there.
Yeah. I agree with your concern.
Okay. And then number 14.
Which one?
On the same page. The statute 553.8659B. This policy is referring to administration, correct? This is not talking about students, it's talking about an administrator going into the restroom. Is that correct?
correct.
So we are not setting anything in these policy documents today about students going into a restroom.
We have that in our code of conduct, Mrs. Foreman.
You're right, but I just want to make that
Yes.
clear, that this is not talking about students, it's talking about school administration and staff, so,
Correct.
all right. Adults, so, okay.
Yes.
All right, that's it on that one. 5772, okay, this is on the weapons. Let me find it.
Page 17 of 42. 19 of 42 is where it says on the PDF.
Okay.
Second set.
Yeah, I'm not there.
That's all right. 5742.
Well, that didn't help. I'm sorry, what page did you say it was?
19 of 42 is
Oh,
where,
okay, I see, oh, okay, all right, thank you, thank you.
19 of
That's
42.
helpful, okay,
that's the new one, like after
right,
the red line. Yeah.
right, okay. On page 2 of that policy where it talks about students being able to, you're eliminating the unloaded from the policy, so that, so that if a student is in ROTC or firearms, they can carry a loaded weapon across campus?
I don't read it. It says only if a firearms training range. So I read it as only if you're going to the training range, which is not on our campuses other than the one out
Okay.
soon to be.
Take
Unless
a
I'm
look
reading
at
that
number
wrong.
A. Take a look at number A. If someone is carrying a firearm across campus, they can leave it unloaded until they arrive at whatever function they're at. So I find that disturbing, that anyone can walk across campus, that the possibility that there is a loaded firearm other than a security officer on campus, that disturbs me, so.
So my question is on that, just the dialogue. I guess in JROTC, kid could potentially, when they do the like BB gun shooting and things like that on campus for target stuff, I think they do. I'm not really 100% sure. I never had a kid in that. But if they were to do that, if they could do that, if they brought their own BB gun, like, is that, I'm assuming that's what this is. Like, they're bringing their own in for that activity.
I mean, this is a very rare
Oh,
circumstance.
I mean, yeah, I mean,
We all know that you need to be, licensed and all that and registered. So this is a very rare incidents. These edits aren't, these edits can be unedited, right, or edited. They can be continued to be edited. So it's not set in stone, and that's why we're going through this process. Again, there's really no incident in our K-12 setting where this is happening or can happen. Yes, there is an exception for our JROTC program, but we have instructors for that. They are not handling in any bit a live weapon. They're dealing with essentially dummy kind of weapons for drill teams and things like that. So this is more of a non K-12 setting, so I just want to state that. So
Then there should be no concern about whether it's loaded or unloaded. Leaving
correct.
it to say unloaded as opposed to striking that, because it's not happening.
right. I mean, I agree with you. It's
And my point is that they can carry the ammunition with them until such time that they need it. In the
And again, there's no-
unusual, very rare occasions.
Yeah, and just for the public watching, there is no K-12 school in Manatee County that has a live firearm situation with students. This is, we you know, again, this would be, you know, in the rare instance of some sort of JROTC drill program. But so even a firearm of whatever sense being brought on a school campus is one illegal, except for an exception, a rare exception, as this policy details.
I'd like to see the unloaded left in, so, I don't know how everybody else feels about that one.
I think what we could do in that instance is we could reach back out to Neola to ask whether there was a statutory change or a specific judicial opinion that caused their attorneys to suggest that edit, or whether they did it broadly in response to, again, you could have districts with career centers that are, you know, located where you have, you know, a range that's adjacent or what. So was that change made because another district said, well, wait, what about this? Or was the change made because there was a statutory or judicial reason? That may help us to know how critical that change is or is not. Is that acceptable to the board?
Number D, why is that there? I don't quite follow the thinking on that one. That they can have a firearm in their car,
Well,
except on campus?
so again, you know, state and federal laws always are, you know, we follow state and federal laws, right? So in no circumstance would anybody who is not licensed and registered to have a firearm would be in possession of one. If they are violating state and federal law. In this circumstance, and under this state statute, a firearm can be in a vehicle because it's a private conveyance if it's locked and secured. If you're registered and licensed to have a firearm, right? So again, if you have a weapon in your vehicle when you're not registered or licensed to have one, no matter where you are, it's a violation of state and federal law. In this circumstance, if you are of age and are registered appropriately and licensed appropriately, following all state and federal laws, you may be in possession of a weapon in your vehicle, and that is your private conveyance. If it's properly locked and stored in your vehicle, according to this state statute, it can be so in your vehicle.
And according to this.
And potentially be on school property. Yes.
Do we have to do that? Do we have to allow?
Well, it would, and I'll wait for the board counsel's raising his hand. Yes.
Mr. Nye.
Yeah, I'm reading the statute. It also qualifies that it's a person 18 years of age or older.
Right.
And we do have some of those.
Yeah.
So if we have a 19-year-old, pick on Manatee High School student who is licensed, has it secured in his car, he can bring it on campus. He can bring it to the parking lot.
Yeah.
I would even the word bringing. It is locked and secured in his private conveyance, and he's licensed and registered and he's of age. Now, as soon as he says something about it, right, then the code of conduct, and other things might come into play. But if you are of age, you're registered, you're licensed, it's locked, it's secured in your vehicle per this statute, following all state and federal laws. You are following the law and board policy.
Do we have the right, as the board, to say, no, you can't bring, you leave it home, You cannot have it in your car.
I will I'm going to have the board counsel, I would just say this is not I don't think a legal thing to say. There are people 18 years and over who park on school property, right? Teachers, school admin, visitors, so on and so forth. So somewhat of the answer to your question. I mean, to enforce something that is legal by state and federal law is something I'll let the board counsel.
Well, not that it would ever happen, but a school board member could have a gun in his car in the parking lot, and there's an altercation, and he can access the gun.
Well, again, he'd be then violating, he would then be stepping into state and federal laws
I'm referring to, I'm joking, I'm referring to.
This is
to an incident
always that
happened.
balance between, right, state, federal law.
So that's what
Yes,
I'm asking is, do we have the right to restrict that from being in our parking lot?
I think it's a Mr. Dye question.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't answer that.
If
right
we
at
have
this
the right to
moment.
restrict it, I would like to keep them out of our parking lots.
I mean, this is a statute, whereas our policy is just a policy.
Okay, but,
So you gotta look at, I'd have to look at which prevails.
but up to now, we have not, that statute's been around, so it's not like it's brand new, right?
Yep.
So, and up to now, we haven't had it in our policy that,
And there's property rights as well, that you can prohibit people from bringing firearms onto property.
mm-hmm,
So this isn't in the public right of way, it's
mm-hmm.
the school district property. So that's another factor that is in our favor, but it's,
Okay, well, I'd like everybody to weigh in on what you think about that, if we can restrict it,
It's
and we
cons-
have.
it's constitutional right,
Mhm.
the right to carry the firearm
Mhm.
versus sort of a property right of the school district. So I'm happy to look at that, see if there's anything.
Yeah, I'm not comfortable with that, so.
But there is no exception in the statute, as y'all can see. Sort of all-inclusive.
Okay. All right, and then 7540, the technology. We just went through the 5-year technology plan. This is on page, where is it?
25 of 42.
And it's taking, eliminating the review of the plan annually and, review of the implementation annually. And I have concerns about that. This is in a different color font, so does this mean that this is us and not Neola?
Yeah, I call this the Gina Messenger color. This is, over the years, we developed that.
I love that I'm gonna have a legacy of font color.
The purple is my legacy.
Oh, Mrs. Foreman is. Okay, I need to
Yeah.
change that.
Don't
Well,
give her credit.
yeah. Someone's fighting over your legacy. But yes, purple means it's a Manatee color, a Manatee County edit.
Okay, all right. I'd like to hear the superintendent weigh in on this, because I certainly don't want to see our 5-year plans get done every 5 years and gather dust, so.
So I actually think, we can revert that back, because the original conversation was about doing a 5-year plan with board approval and annual update by the superintendent and CTO. And then there was the first draft of this had that extra sentence in there, and then I decided that I did want annual board approved. So my intention in taking out another sentence in the first draft of this before the board saw it was that there would be annual board approval of changes. So I think we can just revert that back to saying annually.
All right, great. There goes my purple. Thank Okay. Then 8405, aren't you glad you let me go first?
Sure.
Okay, 8405, Office of Safe Schools. Um,
34.
Okay, yeah, starts on 34. Within this policy, page 8 of 9, which would be our PDF page 41. Number G4, it's just some of the old stuff, I'm just wondering if we should delete it. I'm sorry, G1 talks about the year 21, 22, and then first part of G2 talks about 22, 23 school year. Those are gone, I mean, those are over. So do we really want that in our policies?
Good catch, Mary.
Fair point. Let me check with Neola on that. If it works, we can. You'll see that edit then. Yes.
Okay, all right. And then, actually, I just jump ahead to our group number 4. I'll find it. Okay.
Where are you jumping?
I'm jumping to the last part, policies for June 25 approval, part 2,
3.
number .3. Yeah, okay. And that's on the curriculum development, 2210.
Where are you at? I'm
Oh,
sorry.
well, I guess maybe I don't know.
What page are you on?
Page 8 of that 35, but it's
Okay.
page 2.3
Okay,
is the hyperlink.
gotcha.
And I'm not finding it. This was about policy 2210, wherever that may be.
Yeah, page 8 of 35.
I'm there.
Okay, thank you. All right, page 2 of that, which would be page 9 of 35, I guess. Where it talks about reading instruction in charter schools. Okay. The paragraph that starts, the district's CRP will include all district schools, including charter schools, unless a charter school elects to submit a plan independently from the district. Can you explain to us what are the requirements on that? Because if we got a charter school that we have approved, and suddenly they come in with their own reading plan, and their reading scores plummet, which causes our scores to go down, which, this is disturbing. I could see this going wrong in so many ways, so.
So, Ms. Foreman, this is a state requirement. The procedure for our team is Ms. Nichols in elementary curriculum reaches out to our charter schools, kind of shares our comprehensive evidence-based reading plan with them. They provide feedback to her on whether they plan to use the district reading plan or whether they choose to develop their own and have their own boards approve it. If they choose to do that, they go through that process internally, submit their plan to Ms. Nichols, and then she provides all of those to the state.
And does the state approve their plans? I mean, is somebody reviewing it?
Yes, the state reviews and provides feedback to, when they have concerns about what may be in a plan. So Ms. Nichols is in communication with the state, for example, on our reading plan and receives feedback about it.
What happens the following year? Say that their reading plan doesn't work out. What happens the following year? It just continues? They can keep submitting this plan?
I mean, I would say then, if that resulted in the underperformance of a charter school, it would be, the same process we would go through for any concerns about a charter school's performance.
That takes a lot of time. And I mean, it takes years to get corrective action on a charter school that's not performing.
Right.
Right? So, okay, but we have to do this.
Correct. This is the state process.
Okay. Thrilling, all right. Then on, page 2 of 3 on this one, okay, and that same page, the last sentence, the state-approved form shall be submitted as required, to Florida DOE by June 15th of each year. Do we get the, performance data in enough time to comply with that? Is this? Says the district will annually evaluate the implementation of its CERP on state-approved form after conducting a root cause analysis of student performance data to evaluate the effectiveness of the interventions.
So that reflection tool is like that paragraph says on a form prescribed by the state. There's several components to it. Yes, we you know, the advantage of our new assessment system is that we do get the data back quicker from that. But also there's a lot of stakeholder input that goes into that. So you're supposed to be consulting with your teachers and your administrators and your reading coaches, and they're providing qualitative feedback, and that informs the tool. So it's kind of like more of an organizational self-reflection tool than it is a quantitative one.
But it's doable by June 15th.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, thank you. Okay, student records. I did not write down that policy number.
8330.
Okay, what page would that be, please?
Ooh, something just happened here.
Oh, here we go. Okay, it's
14.
14. Yep, thanks. Okay. Student records, page 9 of 12 on that one. Okay. This one's disturbing, to me anyway, and that we do not provide, a student is transferring, they need their records sent, we cannot provide reports of serious or recurrent behavior patterns, nor psychological evaluations. This is at the bottom of 9, it's be page 22.
Okay.
I just
Yeah.
picture sending,
The bottom of it.
yeah, sending Nicholas Cruz to a different school and surprise. So,
I'll check on that, Mrs. Foreman.
yeah,
Because it's from this rulemaking, so I'll circle back with you on that.
yeah, I think we need to be able to.
Yeah,
I would want if there another district is sending us a,
Yeah.
you know, a Nicholas Cruz that
Yeah,
they
yeah.
let us know, so. Okay, and then page 10 of 12 on that one. I'm almost done, guys.
Fine.
Second paragraph. It's not a change, but it just kind of amused me that we're talking about that we are allowed to microfilm student records. And electromagnetic, perhaps we want to consider
Emitting.
coming into the 21st century and change it to digital.
Electromagnetic's not used a whole bunch anymore?
I have no
I don't even know.
idea. I've never encountered electromagnetic records, but digital or, you know, that would be all right. Electronic.
Microfilm?
Yeah, we're gonna get a public comment from the electromagnetic business.
Yeah.
Man, who-
Come on,
It's a
microfilm?
huge, yes, big lobbying group too. Yeah, so, and that was it. So,
I mean, nobody uses thumb drives anymore. We use a cloud, like microfilm and electromagnetic.
yeah,
Good catch.
yeah,
We're still like the
all right, that's it.
1950s.
Thank you.
Any other board member comments?
Yes.
I was gonna say, I just have a request that Mr. Dye gives us a legal opinion on that policy about weapons, as Mrs. Mormon has requested. And also, Mrs. Foreman had brought up a couple other changes, and when you give her an update, just give it to the whole board, please.
Very
Thank
good.
you.
Ms. Fry?
On page 20 of the weapons, in the first set, paragraph or item A student may carry. I think that should be with an adult or staff member who is conducting this program. That would probably be my little niche I would add into that. We certainly don't want a student walking from one area to another with a weapon without escort, I guess would be the good term, escorted with an administrator.
What would you do about the firing range for MTC?
Right, those are students that
That's-
could be 28-year-olds.
Those are students well beyond the,
We would need to.
We would have
We would
to,
have to allow for that in here.
right.
or put it in there, yeah.
Eventually, we're gonna have to update this policy, I'm sure.
And I'll work with Mr. Dye on.
Right, right, just a little bit, but,
Through Ms. Cox, we'll,
right, to the point of having individuals with a weapon locked, concealed in their vehicles or whatever. I don't know how we would ever conceivably be able to manage that.
Like enforcement?
Right, there is no way, I mean, that would be almost violating the Second Amendment. There's just no way that we could conceivably do that. So, to me, if you're an adult, and that's where the line is, adult, and you are licensed, and you are an employee, and, it's their right to have what they have in their vehicle. It's not for us to search. The encouragement would be, of course, to have it locked, secured in a multiple ways, a locked door and a locked compartment inside their vehicle would be the thing. But to that point on that page, I would like to see if we could add escorted administrative or supervised or something to that, because this, and it just says which has been approved in advance by the principal or site administrator as a program or class which firearms could be carried. It does not say anything about that student being escorted with that. So that would be the biggest thing for me on that.
No.
So I don't know, Mr. Dye can work on the language or whatever on that. And then on to the first set, actually, 1210. I think Ms. Foreman touched on that a little bit. Am I correct, Ms. Foreman, on 1210?
yes.
On paragraphs 5 and section 2, lines 5 and 6 to me are basically the same language. Didn't you bring that up?
Yeah.
I thought you did, but good catch, because I saw that too. I'm like marking out the word, and to me it's almost redundant. And and even to that on page, the second, the next page, I don't know why we're not consistent, and I'm looking at the top of page 3 on the PDF. Why we don't say like paragraph 9 and 10 or sentence 9 and 10, why there's not a space. I'm just kind of mechanical about that. It just runs right into the next one.
I understand.
And it does that again on 13 and 14, 15 and 16. It's just one of those, it doesn't separate that. So that's on all of our policy. I've seen that on a multitude of the policies that we have. We don't have that one little space in between there.
Ms. Bray, that's more Kevin's error when it, and so I'll clean that up, but when the.
Oh, I didn't mean to call you out. You called yourself out.
No, that's that's why I'm losing my hair. But when Neola then publishes these in our board docs, that's
Okay.
all cleaned up, and
Okay.
so what you're seeing is not reflected in our official. But you're right. I will
Need a
Okay.
Kevin color.
make that better.
Kevin Color, there we go. All right. Policy 1242, you'll have to help me because I didn't write the top number on here.
1242. Okay, it's
Where am I?
professional learning. Yeah, 1242.
Yeah, where is that on the first set?
Yes, the first set of the part 2, first page of part 2.
First page of part 2. Okay, yes, okay. That's where I'm at.
I know there's a T missing in the.
All of the green highlights are new. I just want to commend everybody for putting this stuff in. I think it's a great addition to have all of these listed. Collaborative partners, I think that's the key when I saw it, and B. So that was just more of a shout out on that one. And then I don't know where I'm at on this one, I forgot the reports of complaints of harassing conduct. If you could help me.
It's in the 1362, 3362 probably.
3362, okay. Do you know what page that is, on what section?
Looks like,
I forgot to write the page number. I printed it, but I forgot to write page number on it. 3362.
yeah, right there, 17, probably 17, page 17 of part 2.
Okay, yep. Okay, section 5 is where I'm going. Pregnancy harassment, section 5, bullying. Okay. In section 5, reports and complaints of harassing conduct. Anonymous reports of alleged act of bullying or harassment may be reported to an administrator, supervisor, or other school district official. However, formal disciplinary actions may not be based solely on an anonymous report. That's a little kind of like counterintuitive to me. It's like you can tell, but there may probably not be any formal disciplinary action based on what you're saying. So it's just more of a statement that kind of, well, if I hear of something, see something, say something, but if nothing's done, the see something, say something kind of falls off because nothing's going to be done about it. That's kind of the way I read this. I don't know if the language could be changed at all, but, or what the other board members feel, but that's kind of the way I read that.
What page is that on?
It's on page 20.
Okay.
Wait, is it 20? 17. I went on down, sorry. Anti-harassment. 17. It's paragraph 5. 4 and 5. trying to find it, Ms. Foreman, I'm sorry.
I remember reading it, but I don't remember the specifics.
Here it is. It's on page 24 of the section, the second set.
Yeah.
Reports and complaints of harassing conduct. Yeah. And the green is where I'm reading. So that's,
I think that's a good point. I think the answer is, everything is, no matter what you're reporting, whether it's a threat or a bullying incident or an harassing incident, is fully investigated. And I think that's just saying, sometimes we have people who may report something that is a retaliation or a false report kind of thing, and it's just meant to say that everything we want everybody to, like you said, if you see something, say something. We don't want any secrets, things like that. We need everybody to report, and everything will be fully investigated. But on the other side, to be fair to everybody involved, everything will be fully investigated, and incidences won't just be handled just based on an incident just on itself, or a report just on itself. Everything is always investigated thoroughly.
Do we have that somewhere in the policy that,
that's what I don't see. Is that it's
that it will be
investigated.
investigated? I mean, require an investigation.
Yeah, we can.
Yeah, that's, I guess, would be my point, that anonymous reports of alleged act of bullying or harassment may be reported to administrator, supervisor, or other district officials and would be investigated thoroughly, matter of fact, and could be or would be thoroughly investigated.
Well, thoroughly is a kind of a subjective term.
Okay.
But
Whatever.
Are you asking that our administration should do the investigation?
No, not the administration, that the district would.
Do the investigating on if there is bullying, harassment, etc. to a student?
No, it's saying anonymous report. Anonymous reports of alleged act of bullying or harassment may be reported. If somebody wants to report something anonymously, because they've got rumor, and we know how kids talk, if they say something, the administrator and or farther up is going to investigate that. The formally disciplined may not be based solely on an anonymous report is what bothers me. That kind of tells the students, well, you can tell us, but there may not be any disciplinary action as a result of your reporting. So I don't know how to frame it, to be honest.
What if I anonymously make up something?
Exactly, that's where I'm going.
Why should she get in trouble if there's nothing
No, but
happening?
they'll investigate it and know that
Right,
there
if
is no
they're,
way I could have done that, whatever they're saying I did.
the point is, if somebody reports something that's false, there should be action for reporting something that's false.
Oh, to the person reporting false.
Right. That's where I'm going. And two, if something's reporting and it's true, formal disciplinary action would be taken. So it's the person that's doing it, and if they're just spreading a rumor to get somebody in trouble,
If it's anonymous, then how do you know who's
Gets in
spreading the
trouble.
rumor?
Yeah.
I get that, but it usually comes out in kids.
I guess my concern with, well, Dr. Weissong, let me ask you this, like, procedurally right now, if an anonymous tip came in to, or anybody, I guess, to a teacher or a staff member, and we are mandatory reporters, don't you have to report it, even if it's anonymous or not?
Well, and again, it depends on the nature of what's in the.
What's being said, sure.
Right, and so, anything that impacts health, safety, welfare
Right.
is going to be investigated, and I just read that line, Vice Chair, as saying, absent any other evidence beyond the anonymous report itself, you're not going to issue discipline. But if the anonymous tip leads to evidence, that substantiates the claim, then there is going to be discipline, right? An anonymous tip that is false, if you don't know who submitted it, you can't issue discipline or report to law enforcement or whatever that somebody gave you a false tip if it's anonymous.
And this policy, if it lays all that out, Ms. Spray. So there's a whole section on the actual investigation process. There's a whole section on whether the anonymous person reporting's identity, how that will be made public or not, and the procedure for that. There's also a section about whether the report itself was retaliation or not, and if it was, what's the action there? So the whole because that's why it's probably whatever it is, 20 some odd pages each. It does continue to lay out maybe your point. It lays out probably answers a lot of your questions about the investigation, the reporter itself, the complaint the complaintee, it lays it all out as it goes throughout the policy.
Okay.
Because it's, obviously we take harassment, bullying, discrimination very seriously. We obviously also have to by state and federal law, but we have very strict procedures here. We have people who handle that in human resources. It's all a very formal process. So, and it all has to be due process on both sides, and it lands on the superintendent's desk. It may even land on your desk. So it's all laid out here in this policy. Yeah.
Right. That was just one that caught me. I'm like, okay, what if somebody's, saying something and then there's no follow-up, but I'm seeing it through there too, so. Okay. Miss Warman had a lot of the ones I had, because I saw the dates.
I copied from you.
Did you?
I did.
Okay, she copied my notes.
I
See,
did.
there you go.
Thank you,
All right.
you did a good job.
Well, you may have something now after discussing, but I got two. I'll do the firearm thing in a second, but the one question I have was from page 19, that same document in the harassment, page 19 of 36. So the word creates is in there. We've added social exclusion.
Oh, okay.
So social exclusion, does this example mean social exclusion? Chad is a talkative student, doesn't get his own work done. I may or may not have this report on my progress reports and report cards. No, I was always a pleasure in class. But Chad is talkative. Other kids around him, I'm the teacher, other kids around him aren't getting their work done because Chad's talkative, etc. I move Chad's desk away from everybody else to socially exclude him to be talkative. I'm now a bully and harassing because that's now in our policy. I've created social exclusion. I'm not saying this is yours. This is what Neola is saying, right?
Let me.
And so I just don't know like, is that a new statute or was that put in?
Yeah,
because I find that
let me study that.
that's a little ludicrous.
Yeah, it looks like it's a statute. So let me study that and circle back with the board on that answer.
Okay. And then the firearm thing, I'm okay with asking die or whatever. I don't think we need to change anything. I think that, number one, you're talking about blue moon activities that there maybe ever be a loaded weapon. So I don't, and it's already going to be an activity that is a small, specific activity and group that's happening on campus that the principal knows, administration knows, if there would ever happen. And I can't think of anything in my time where that actually happened, other than maybe when the air. I mean, not even students though. And so I don't see instances where it's needed to have an escort or etc. As far as in the cars, if we just blanket say students, you're talking about a 25-year-old person that's going into the sheriff and Braden Police Department at MTC. That is a student. So and let's say they're going after their class to the gun range to practice their profession. They can't have a locked up legally locked up gun in their car. I just that's that's kind of again. So you're gonna have signs that unless you're this that I think if you're following federal and state law with a concealed weapon in your car, locked up the way it should be, and you're following those laws, which means you're an adult, you're over 18. I don't have a problem with that. So it's different if you're 18, and so let's go through incidences. If you're 18, you walk into your car, you've gone through the concealed weapon license classes, etc. You have one in lockbox, etc. Now you pull it out, that's a different story. Like that's a different story. But if you drive away, I mean, how many? I would venture to say how many adults are driving onto our campuses for any event with concealed weapons in their car. I don't think there's a way we're ever going to be able to enforce it, and I don't think it's an issue. So that's my take on it. Any
Everyone
extra?
covered all the issues that I had, specifically just some clarification on the
Perfect.
firearm stuff, but I tend to agree with your thoughts on that, Mr. Cho.
Perfect.
Okay. On the firearm in the parking lot, I get it, the adult students at MTC, and that could be excluded in the policy. But having, I'm concerned for the person who has quick access to a gun, especially a student, but even a teacher, that, something sets them off, and all they have to do is walk out to the parking lot, and they have quick and easy access. Whereas if it's at home and something sets them off, they'll have a little cooling off period to go home and get their weapon. So that's what I envision. So I think, yes, it's truly not enforceable. It's not we can't enforce it, but for a liability point of view, that if we have, God forbid, a shooting at a school where somebody has gone to their car, gotten the weapon, gone, and there's been something going on, and it's in our policy that it's okay, that disturbs me, so. Whereas that sentence has not been there before, so I'm of the mindset that should not be an exception, that just take it out. So, I mean, we can.
And it's in the Neola edition, correct?
Correct, per state statute.
Yeah. But we should be able to control what comes on our property, and unless they change the statute. So,
I think,
well,
I was gonna say, I think that's why, we don't need to go back and forth, we just need a legal opinion, because this rescinds our policy, which does say they weren't allowed by employees even to have it in their cars.
Mm-hmm.
So that policy, this is gonna rescind that, so that was there, so.
Yeah.
I just wanna hear whatever, we don't need to have this debate.
Yeah,
'cause
no, we'll have it eventually when he.
We
does
will
it.
have it eventually, yes, once we know the legal opinion.
Absolutely. All right, Mr. Dye's got homework. I don't think we have anything else for you.
got nothing else.
Thank you very much. I know there's a lot of policies. Thank you for reading all those policies and all those things at the meeting. I want to take a 10-minute recess before we bring in our gurus at the legislature. Welcome back to the workshop. I'm going to bring in Sean and Andrew from Sunrise Consulting to discuss not only what happened in the legislature the last session, maybe what do you anticipate happening in the next session, and then talk a little bit about our priorities. So take it away.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here.
Am I on? We're all good. Thank you for allowing us to be here today. We were going to joke with you a little bit, say our presentation is on microfilm, and an old time. No, about you, I had to use it in high school, right? We did the newspapers and even in college. Andrew goes, "Did you ever use microfilm?" I'm yes, Andrew, I am that old. We have had to use it, right? But I want to thank you again for allowing us to be here. Appreciated you all coming up during session when you did. It was an interesting session. I kind of come back and I think I say that every year. I think it was a better year for education. I think there was an intent to, as you know, to do some deregulation bills that passed through. But overall, at the end, it was a bloody bath with $1 billion that was vetoed at the end, and we'll kind of go into that a little bit. But I'm going to start off a little bit and just talk about session and talk about the amount of bills. Generally in session, you have about a 6 to 7% amount of bills that pass, which is probably a good thing. There's a lot of things that are thrown at the wall to see what sticks. This year, it's 16%. It's a little bit adjusted differently on how they consider and count appropriation bills, but about 16% passed. And as you can see, we're still even seeing the past couple of days some of the bills that the governor has vetoed. I'm going to talk about the budget real quick. The budget's at $117 billion. That doesn't mean much to you unless you put things into reference. In 2010, the budget was at $70 billion. So just think in 14 years, we jumped from 70 to 114 billion. That is a huge astronomical number. I will say this, a lot of that, our biggest revenue that we have that comes into the state is from sales tax, just like you. The sales taxes are biggest revenue indicators on how things are happening. And for the state of Florida, unfortunately, we do not have anything on an income tax like other states have. We are dependent on the sales tax. So I'm going to give you a little bit of an idea of what's happened since COVID and what they're looking at projections later to give you some ideas for future economic references. We have a revenue estimating conference that reviews things monthly and also gives projections. The lowest point, nobody's surprised, was when COVID was announced and revenue was dropped down significantly. Because why? Why? Because people couldn't come to the state of Florida at the time. We based a lot of it on tourism. But fortunately for the state of Florida, we bounced back extremely quickly from COVID, extremely quickly, to where every single month from July of 2020, our projections were exceeded beyond what they had expected every single month until just recently, late last year. And the indication actually was a sign of us that things could and would slow down. So what else do we have besides sales tax? You have dock sales, you have corporates, you have your investments from FRS and others. And one of the main things that slowed down was the sales tax and dock sales. Dock sales are always about 2 to 3 months behind home sales. So remember, because you have to buy a home, then you get to the end to where you go and buy it. So you could see that little bit of a trend. But I will say we had a very healthy month in April. April had a $411 million beyond what they had in expectations. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that too. What happens with that extra money? We actually have had almost $2 to $3 billion per year beyond expectation that goes into the reserves. The state of Florida has one of the healthiest reserves that we have ever had in its history. When I first started representing you guys almost 6 years ago, we had enough for about 30 days of operational dollars and general revenue. We are now getting close to almost 90. So it just gives you, we're in a much healthier spot. The biggest kick up that we saw in January in revenue was from our Florida retirement system. I think if you do any type of looking at your retirement, we've kind of made up for some losses that we had last year in the past couple months. But there is some looking at and tapping the brakes. And I'll say this real quick. A lot of the increase that we have had, going back as a sales tax, is because of inflation. All these other things that you and I are buying is causing us to have higher sales tax. So I'm not an economist here, but I will say we could see that we were told about late last October the state of Florida would see some of the funding start to even out when it came to construction. I'm not saying it's gotten better, but it hasn't gone up as much as it had in years before. So when the inflation starts to come down and maybe costs start to come down, you could see some tightening of the belt with the state. And that's what they're looking at right now moving forward. But I want to give you the stat for the state of Florida. If the state of Florida was a country, we would be nearly even with Spain, in the 15th, 16th largest economies in the world. And to put that in perspective, Canada is number 10. So, we're right there at 15 and 16, and Canada is about 40% more than us as an economy, but one of the 10th largest in the world. So I only give you this to preface and say, we're kind of looking at maybe a slowing down. Even though we've seen some really good months, we're looking at everything from tourism and other factors happening. But I will say the leadership team coming in is starting to really see some of these factors going on a downturn. Not to say that it will happen. We could blossom and go through, but I wanted to just give you those little information.
Before we Good morning, board members. Before we move into some specifics on the education piece of the budget, I always like to talk about what happened in your backyard. And I had a slide, and I don't know where it went, but I wanted to point out that the state provided around $8 million to the county to purchase a rattlesnake key. So I'm sure that's of importance to the county for water quality. So you'll see that got funding got provided in your community.
Go ahead, talk about this one.
So moving kind of into the education portion of the state budget, just a few highlights. The FEFP increased 6.73%, as it seems to increase every year. The base student allocation went up $191.25, and the required local effort throughout the state increased by $400 million. I'm sure you've seen a lot of these highlights in your various publications from FSBA and FADS, but just to reiterate, those are some key things that changed in the FEFP.
So let me add one thing on this, which you may or may not know. About 5 or 6 years ago, there was a flip when it came into our budget. There was a flip on who had the highest percentage. It went from healthcare to education. Education still is the highest percentage of our budget. You'll hear us talk about $117 billion. In the state of Florida, $50 billion of that is from general revenue, meaning that's what we are bringing in and all those numbers that I just shared with you. The other $67 billion is pass-through dollars from the federal government, different trust funds that have come through, but $50 billion of that amount is pure coming from our general revenue, and still over the highest amount is coming from education.
So moving in some other education-related items that are not directly in the FEFP, there is money in the budget this year for school district foundation matching grants. That's provided for lower performing foundations that are in districts with lower performing districts, and that money will be available to those districts. And what will have to happen in those, if your foundation were to qualify, it's matching grants, as I mentioned. So private dollars that are donated to the foundation, you'll have to certify to DOE that you've actually received those dollars, and if you qualify, DOE will be able to match the funds that your foundations raise if the Manatee Foundation qualifies. There's some money in the budget for education with music. I think a couple of you, when we were in Tallahassee, we had some discussions with various legislators about music education. So there's some money in the budget for that. It's a priority of Tallahassee. And some money for school safety inspection bonuses. That's in the budget as well. That's new dollars. Moving on, kind of changing, still budgetary changes, more where they blend with not direct dollars. But last year there was a change, and I heard it discussed earlier in one of the items about threat management teams. Now instead of having just a threat management team, you will have to have a threat management coordinator, and there's some money provided to the districts. It's small. It's like $50,000 to $75,000. But once you identify and create the threat management coordinator, DOE will have some dollars to provide to the district for that. Something I put on this slide just because it was of note to the board last year, and a question was about state group health insurance for the colleges. That actually was funded for the colleges, but it was ultimately vetoed by the governor. So I just wanted to highlight the fact that I know it was of interest, just a conversation of what could that look like in the future. And I think the governor made a very clear statement that, for now, no further expansion in that program. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention. And then there's some money available for stipends for transportation for students who go to a school that they're not assigned to go to, a transportation stipend that they will have to receive through a scholarship funding organization. So I wanted to bring that to your attention. Moving.
Can I ask a question there real quick?
Yes,
Can
sir.
you go back to the previous slide?
Yes, sir.
So was number one there, that was, we were trying to amalgamate or connect to the Florida college healthcare system maybe and have school systems be able to do that, and was that the issue, or?
There was interest in exploring the greater general interest of school districts overall, and it was a specific item that we kind of discussed when I was here last year, and we didn't know if the colleges would end up being included or not being included, so I just wanted to share what that outcome was.
The universities are in the Florida college. I'm sorry, the universities are into the health system with the state. The colleges are not. They're in a different setting. They felt it was a better savings for them, and actually, the funny thing, the bill passed, but the appropriations was vetoed.
So this doesn't have anything to do with K-12 then?
No, sir. Just other than we discussed, could K-12 eventually
Get in there.
move that direction? And I think if that K-12 eventually were to move that direction, that's further pushed out in the fact that the colleges were unsuccessful in moving that direction this year. Yes, sir.
I guess. Okay. And then the number two on the transportation, a transportation stipend will be provided to public schools that are. How is that working? Do we have to apply for it or something?
It's going to be, I believe the individual will have to apply for it through the scholarship funding organizations.
Okay.
Yes, sir. And I don't know how much the stipend is.
So it's not money coming to the district, it's money coming to the student.
I don't believe it goes to the student, yes, sir.
Well, you currently get funding for busing, so I'm not sure if that, you know what I mean? I think it's another area where the money is following the student in this situation.
The reason I ask is we get about half of what it costs us. So I was just curious if somebody was looking at that to see like, hey, because I call that a partially funded mandate, you know, like you've told us you got to do this, but we're not going to give you enough money to do it. I was hopeful that maybe that's what this was about, but it sounds like it's something different that.
I think this is more the kids who are taking advantage of the scholarship program is how I read this. Is so they're choosing to go or potentially to like a choice public school, etc. Like we don't provide the transportation for choice.
Okay.
That's how I read it.
Or a charter school that doesn't provide transportation or something like that. Okay, got it. All right, thank you. Yep.
So throughout session, and John,
Okay, these are two of the bills right here. This was a priority, and you know, a lot of times, I know we're going to talk about it at the end. The legislative process, as we have talked about with you many times, is very much leadership driven, and leadership had in the Senate had the goal and the object to really do a lot of dereg. The dereg bills, I think one of them changed. Was it a strike call?
So there were three pieces. There were three deregulation bills that were filed at the beginning of session, and each one of those bills had separate topics that they covered. Senate Bill 7000, which was a third one that you don't see on the screen, ultimately didn't pass, but much of the policy from that bill actually was included in 7002. I don't have grave details on the screen of those bills. Both are extremely lengthy. I obviously have supplied
we can
Kevin.
put it on the microfilm, and it'll make it a little bit easier.
Absolutely,
you
yeah.
know.
But those bills are hundreds of pages. But ultimately, these are the two bills that passed, and we've provided further details to Mr. Chapman and to the superintendent, and I'm happy to give that.
We're happy to give you the bill analysis. Is probably a good way for your staff to look at it. But I will tell you, it was very frustrating. We'd go into a committee, and then there would be strike calls and all new information in these, and so very, very large bills with a lot of information. But I do think it was a better benefit for us. Not as far as we'd like to see them go, but definitely a good benefit.
So just to jump in right there, since you're on it, the dereg bills. Obviously, I know that was like Pasadomo's big, like you say, leadership. What does leadership look like with next year? Is this something that's gonna be
Great question.
taken on and run with, or no, or is it?
So they really haven't. So I'll talk about the two. You have Senator Albritton, who's coming in, who's going to be the Senate President, and then you're going to have Danny Perez, who's going to be the Speaker of the House. None of them, except for Albritton, they've kept things very close. Obviously, they're still in the aspect of you have the person who's in charge who hasn't left yet. None of them have mentioned education yet. Albritton has made a really big issue about water. He has a farming background with that. So Perez is going to be a little bit of a different animal, I'll say. I'll kind of go back to almost the days when we had Richard Corcoran. Even though Richard Corcoran leaned a little bit more in education, Danny Perez is not so much focused on the budget and appropriations. He's going to see a little bit more of a policy. So I think it's going to be an interesting session. But he's kind of he has especially held very close to his breast what his issues are going to be moving forward. And I think as we move forward to our next update, we'll have a little bit better idea when they start talking around the state what some of the indicators that they would like to see move forward. So great question.
And I have some more on these two bills, but they'll come at a later slide. Moving on, student transportation. Last year, we saw that there was a shift in student safety where local governments could put camera detection systems in school zones. Obviously, school buses as well can have the cameras. I don't know if they're mounted to the stop sign, but around the buses for when somebody drives around a bus. There's some changes to that have to do with reflective signage and how much the vendor who processes those or who owns those cameras or supplies those cameras, how much they can keep from the fee, and some other various things like that designating that the cameras themselves are not remote surveillance, clearly defining that. So some changes related to that program was passed in this bill.
Can I ask
Yes,
a question
ma'am.
on that one? It's not so much maybe in these two bills, but they made the law that the blinking lights at all 4-lane highways be removed. Is that anything in this where I'm saying like on Highway 70, Highway 64, 301, all of those state highways could not have the school zones anymore? And the blinking lights were disconnected. Mr. Rinaldi could probably expand on what I'm talking about. Is this part of that?
When you say blinking lights, do you mean like the crosswalk portion?
Yes,
of that?
the crosswalk portions.
That is a piece of legislation that passed last year. It has,
the yellow one?
Yes,
Yes.
and that's not part of this bill.
No, but I will tell you, we have heard several of them talk about it. The yellow blinking lights are very, very confusing, why they're not red, or another one that would make you to stop. That was not part of this bill. I would suspect from what I've heard that will be an item that will be up for discussion next session.
Okay, good deal.
The problem is, again, would it be an unfunded mandate to cities, counties, and schools who have the yellow already for bicycle crossings and everything else? But I will tell you, we've heard several legislators talk about that.
Okay, because I'm hoping I'm not the only one that
Nope.
brought that up because.
You're not. It's very confusing. Right.
It is, and it's a big safety concern. Constituents have come to me and say, hey, what happened to that light?
Yes, ma'am.
Are you talking about, you're talking about when you get into a school, the blinking light that says, hey, this is a school zone.
This is a school
Not the
zone.
crosswalk
I'm sorry.
that are on Cortez.
Misreference.
Those crazy crosswalks on Cortez.
Right.
Yeah, that's a
No,
different,
that's
She's
different.
talking about the lights as you're going into
School zone.
as you're driving into a school zone.
Yes, they did.
I was not aware.
I actually had someone call me and got a ticket, and he's like, "Where? Like, I'm used to seeing this light. The light's no longer there."
Right.
Warning.
I'd be happy to
Please.
broach that issue with you, with your
Right.
legislative delegation, by the way.
And
Absolutely.
I just quickly reviewed the bill. That is not part of this bill. And my confusion on the crosswalk lights.
Right.
We're happy to help you. If I'll work with you, Kevin, to bring that to our delegation's attention. Then.
I'm not talking just our district, I'm talking, I
Sure.
spoke with other board members in other districts. Same thing. What happened? Who put that bill forward? Who got that removed? Should be removed.
DOT's been doing some crazy.
Yeah, they have been doing a lot of crazy things, but to jeopardize a school zone, this is the problem. You can go down little 26th Avenue out here by Johnson, and there's a school zone where you have the crossing guards, and you have to slow down to 20.
Mm-hmm.
But on Highway 64 and 70, you do not. They took that away.
I don't think it was any legislation. It appears that FDOT made some decisions that they were going to remove the school zone lights, and it impacted a number of our campuses.
Well, we'd be happy to, if you would like to put something together, a letter for us, and for us to approach your delegation to review that with DOT. We'd be happy to do that.
And if I may also, and Chair Choate, and you may know, DOT is divided into various districts, and each region has a district secretary. So I don't know if the school board has a relationship with their district secretary or not, but it may be worth reaching out.
I have reached out to them.
We'll take it.
Well, they're gonna be at the city,
Yep.
at City Hall tomorrow at 1:30
Oh, well, there you go.
from Bartow because of this roundabout thing. or the traffic.
traffic flow here.
Yeah,
Right,
yeah.
right.
So I can't make it, but if anybody else wants to jump in.
And it's one of those situations with this particular, I'm sorry to get off topic, but where one department doesn't talk to the other department and the impact that
Right.
that has with
impact.
this and that, it's just, I mean, that was huge. And I mean, when that stopped, I started getting calls.
We're happy to intervene on your behalf over
Right.
this. Absolutely.
Okay, sorry.
No, thank you.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Moving on top of the school deregulation bills, there's just generally always a couple education. I almost want to call them an omnibus bill, but they're not. 500 pages. They're more like 150. There's this House Bill 1361. Makes a lot of changes to the New World Reading Scholarships, New World Reading Initiative, and that bill is a lengthy bill that passed to make some changes for reading. Another bill that passed was 1285. And that makes some changes for charter schools. As you can see here, classical teacher certification requires specialized teaching certificates for classical schools. Charter schools exemptions for annual tax exemption application. So as well.
And again, we're trying to give you the tip of the iceberg. I think overall we had about 112 bills, plus we were watching for you throughout session. So
when I was putting this PowerPoint together, I was really trying to figure out which highlight points to put in. All of these have even the bill. So the bills are 100 or so pages, and the analysis are 20 pages. I was trying to find 4 bullet points to put on the screen that would make any kind of sense. So moving on, chaplains in schools allows chaplains to provide support services with parental consent. The chaplains will have to undergo background screenings, and the chaplains do not have to have same licenses as school counselors. But there's 2 bills, this one and another one you'll see, that have to do with outside services coming into schools. The next one is, as I just said, this is for patriotic organizations, and it allows representatives from patriotic organizations to speak to students, and it allows them to have time within the school day to use that time for outreach.
Girl Scouts.
Yeah, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, perhaps the American Legion, not necessarily a political organization.
They
but
listed them all in statute.
Yeah. This bill says that in curriculum, the history of communism will have to be taught. And what's going to happen is the Department of Education, in coordination with Miami-Dade College. Miami-Dade College will create a think tank, if you will, an organization within Miami-Dade College, and there's various partners that college will have to partner with to help develop a curriculum to teach the history of communism within the classroom. And that think tank, and that's not maybe the correct term, within Miami-Dade College will have a board that's appointed by the governor, of various educational folks and curriculum folks to help develop that curriculum. Last education policy bill that I have before I kind of touch on a few points from the deregulation bills. As you know, legislation passes, and then subsequent years we have to make some tweaks to clean things up. This bill has to do with vouchers and distributing vouchers. I know the school district has a piece of the voucher system, and just improving the process for timely voucher distribution. The last thing I'll touch on House Bill 151. Every year, the legislature passes a Florida retirement system bill. This year, last year, there was a very large retirement system bill that passed, expanding drops significantly. I'm sure we've seen that in decreasing the time in service for high risk or special risk employees. This year, the bill was introduced, including a cost of living adjustment. And I expected that to be a very large bill that would end up passing. I know there was some leadership in the House that wanted to see the cost of living adjustment go back into the Florida retirement system. That was a deal between the Senate and the House, and ultimately did not make it. This year, that bill just sets the new retirement rates, which they went up again, and also makes some changes. So someone who has a break in service, or not break in service, they retire, and they have to meet the term of break in service, or the definition of retirement, and that's where you have to sit out for 12 months. And if you come back, you're not able to claim both sets of benefits. Well, they changed that, and now after 6 months, you can come back and receive the 7 to 12 month penalty period went away.
And added to that, we've always heard about things about Florida retirement system. Just reviewed an actuarial study nationwide. The state of Florida goes between 1 and 5 with the healthiest retirement system in the nation. Right now, I think we were 2 or 3. I forgot which one where it came back. So even though we had the increases, we still have a very healthy retirement system.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, sir.
The contribution rate adjustments, I know that I recall that there was talk and how high and how much it was gonna cost, like sheriff's offices and school districts. That didn't pass, right?
I did not see that.
So if
It
you're
only
que-
went up like
yeah, it went up, and I can.
to cover again, they do it on actuarial studies to make sure that the output is available years down the line. So there was some, but it wasn't the huge.
But there was a bill that was
Right.
proposed that was
That
going
was
to.
really big, I remember
Right.
that.
No,
Yeah,
that did
yeah,
not pass.
yeah. And it may still come back, but,
Right.
yeah, okay.
And last one.
So, last thing I wanted to go.
I just want to preface when you go into this. So the reason we put the slide in here is a little bit different. We probably didn't have this in here a few weeks back, but the governor spoke for about an hour when he did his vetoes, and he made and it wasn't so much an emphasis on education, but it was overall. He said that he really wanted to see schools, cities, counties, all these municipalities really look more at grant funding. And I think a lot of this is Senator Albritton coming in as Senate President, because he's made a really big issue about folks and the way that they get infrastructure for water and water quality, water improvement. He really wanted to. Now, this was not discussed before the budget started, that they wanted us to pursue and push everybody into grants. But that's why this slide is in here. And I think that was a statement when the governor made when he did $1 billion vetoes. It was a lot of programs that he felt, or his folks felt, in the Office of Budget and Policy, that they wanted to see folks go more towards grants and those type of programs that are available. Even though the grants program for libraries and arts were vetoed, but that was a statement that was made.
Yes, he mentioned that over the past couple of years in his administration, he's put a lot of work into ensuring various grant opportunities within state agencies have good revenue sources, and he would encourage local governments and school boards and college systems to at least look at those first. So any projects that potentially could have been funded out of a grant, and they were there's a long list of projects that were vetoed that could have potentially been funded out of a grant. So the reason I bring that up, obviously we requested on behalf, you as a board requested money for a launch center to make that launch center really a great thing. And we had quite a bit of conversation throughout session about some feedback on the merits and the timing of that process. The launch center did not receive funding this year, as you well know, but it was also something that was discussed with us in Tallahassee was to apply for a grant for that center. And I think on this slide, I think going forward, and I'm not speaking about next legislative session, I'm just speaking about if we look at the launch center as a project, what is the next chapter for it? And for right now, I think it's potentially applying for a grant from the state for that launch center. So I'm not necessarily saying if the board requesting funding for that or not, perhaps picking a different project for next year to request funding for, while we let the launch center go on its next endeavor and look for a grant fund for that, because that may be a more appropriate funding source.
That was one of the programs we talked to with Chair Choate with DOE, correct?
correct.
Yes.
Chancellor,
O'Farrell.
Yep, Kevin O'Farrell.
there you go.
Right.
So,
I heard an interesting observation from the financial CFO in Miami-Dade, and he said that because of how the state is not funding public schools, that perhaps it's time for, when we do our legislative priorities, to drop the model of asking for money for our projects, which is what this is, and rather go and change our legislative requests to the bigger picture, the broad picture that will affect all the districts in the state. And I thought that was an interesting, there's a shift in how the legislature is looking at financing public education. Maybe we need to look at a shift in what we ask for.
Like if all the districts had $20 million worth of asks, if we all said, just give us $20 million more for revenue coming for it
Well,
to fund, like that, is that what he was trying to say?
Well, yeah, like we go in and we say, okay, we want the launch center, we want this project, and they're doing that all through the state.
Right.
In the meantime, they're underfunding. I was appalled when I heard the session on transportation, because they don't look at what transportation really costs. They don't start from the point of view of this is how much gas costs, this is how much, a bus depreciation costs, how much personnel costs. They just look at what it was last year and they just increase it. And it's been underfunded for years.
Yes, ma'am.
But if we all come together and in our ask be.
Here's what I would say. I agree with you. If we all came and said, hey, we want to increase the BSA to this amount. So I've also heard that question displayed in another manner. Should we start to tweak the FEFP? I get a little concerned when I hear that, because when you take from one group, you give to another. When you give to one group, you take from another. That would take a lot of districts battling against themselves. A lot of people believe the way that Pinellas and Hillsborough is funded compared to Pasco and Sarasota and Manatee is very different, on what we should get because of the discrepancies there. So I don't know that, the black and white answer to that. If everybody came together, every single school district, and said, from the small counties to those who can't even, we talk about, there's counties that can't even build their own schools with impact fees that the state has to help with. It would be great to see everybody come and do that. I just don't know if they would, because again, going back, you'd have to tweak the FEFP, and some schools would lose districts and some would win in that battle. Unless we just said, let's take the BSA and increase it by 12% across the board, everybody would win. That's the way it would have to be done.
So
I'm just pointing out that observation.
Sure.
And it does align with what you're talking about with them wanting to go, for us to go to grants versus appropriations.
But then I'll say, sometimes I think you have to, the great program you were talking about before I got up. I mean, where is that funded in the funding models? Isn't that considered somewhat of let's try a pilot project with funding? I think that's a great program to ask for money. I was sitting back there, giving it, said that's a phenomenal program, but I think that'd be a great program to ask for some dollars from the state. I know you guys want to get ready on this and moving forward very quickly. So I agree with you. My mom used to always say, when you say but, it gets rid of everything you just said before. But if everybody doesn't do it, then we're seen on the outlier. So
is there a way we can combine the Soarin' 4 and the launch for next year? Put them in the same building, maybe?
So that would be, and from a grant process goes, the first grant that I'm going to help you guys explore is one provided from the Florida Department of Commerce for Job Growth Grant Fund. The governor's asked for a lot of money to be put into that grant fund. What we would have to do is look at the criteria that grant asks for, and if SOAR project would also fit that criteria, then that is your decision to make a request. Oh, sorry. I thought it was a real question. My apologies.
He takes things literally.
Literally. What I'd like to say is that last year we put together this document, and the bottom of this document is your individual project request, and the top of this document is more substantive policy. Obviously, with being a school district, every policy request is truly budgetarily in some form or fashion, but budget meets policy, and policy meets budget. I think the Manatee School Board is very unique in the way it can ask for some of these. As we well know, we've seen that Chair Choate goes and speaks with the Department of Education Commissioner, and it's well received. I think that my recommendation to you as my client is maybe not so much to rely necessarily on other school boards to make some of these fights in Tallahassee for you, but maybe lead the charge and ask for their support. And you have a great list together, and I want to touch on what happened, and that goes back to some of these deregulation bills. So I want to look at priority number 2, which was amending Section 1012.22 to allow long-term teachers to receive more compensation based on merit rather than contract type. And so this year, while we didn't necessarily get that, what we did get is that the teachers, you no longer have to exclude their advanced degrees. in creating the salary schedules for instructional personnel. And that came out of Senate Bill 7002, I believe. There was some more to that in Senate Bill 7000 that would actually have allowed you to award and I'm going to read this verbatim, to award salary adjustments for highly effective teachers that are between the performance and grandfathered salary schedules without the requirement of at least 25% greater than the highest annual salary adjustment under the grandfathered schedule. And I'm sure every single one of you knows a little bit more what that means and how I just said it. But that was originally proposed and that didn't make it through. So I think there's a shift kind of going towards some of the priorities that you are asking for. And then the last one I'll touch on is priority number 4, which is allowing the volunteer citizen advisory committees who attend a meeting or workshop by means of communication media technology to be deemed present at the time of the meeting. We're moving that direction in the fact that there was a bill that passed that actually allowed exactly that, not for the advisory boards that you guys were putting together, but for certain environmental advisory boards, citizens advisory boards. So I think that's a positive, I don't want to say nose in the tent, but a positive shift towards kind of what you're asking for on priority number 4. I don't have as positive news for you on 1 and 3, but I do think that this priority list that you guys have put together, and as I well expected from the school board, kind of matches potentially what leadership is doing in Tallahassee.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
From a board standpoint, like, I don't know if we're ready necessarily to jump into all of our priorities. Like that, half of this page is the Greater Florida Consortium, which doesn't meet till September, when Ms. Foreman hosts the fabulous event. At least we're all banking on that.
I had lunch there yesterday. It's beautiful. It'll be
So, I mean, I don't know how deep. I do agree with the sentiment of looking at some of our requests in more of a grants rather than the appropriations, and hopefully targeting which grants to approach and go after. I do think that although I'm extremely passionate about the Launch Center and what could potentially happen there, I do think we've got to go back and readdress what is the reality cost of that center now. The numbers that we had of 16 million was 3 years ago priced.
Wow.
So I just highly doubt that that's a reality. So I think that although that doesn't mean we can't go after some grant money and get some stuff that's going to be dedicated to that, I do think that needs to be readdressed and looked at. So I don't know if the board, are we ready? Are we wanting to actually discuss our priorities right this minute? Are you wanting to bounce ideas off? What's the prerogative here? I mean,
My first thought on appropriations versus grants. To me, a grant is easier to get than an appropriation, just based on historical, for my time up here. Like the Soarin' 4 project. I can see that being a grant more than an appropriation. I can see the Launch Center being more a grant than appropriation, just like the aviation building down by the airport. I can see that being a grant more than appropriation.
but we did get appropriations.
We did,
for that.
right. But I'm just saying, now that things are shifting, like you had indicated, into trying to steer people to do the grant side instead of the appropriation sides. Because at the appropriation level, it's gotta go through all these processes. That's too in the grants, of course, but
I just want to, let me just temper. I mean, I'm not saying this is going to go in that direction. This is just a governor who's going to be here for 2 more years.
Right.
We have a legislature who writes the rules when it comes to appropriations on this. Again, the governor has the last say and has the vetoes. I would say be looking in that direction, but I wouldn't say, and change your entire sale. But, I mean, put one area, and then I still think we need to submit something. I think it needs to be a good program, a good idea. We've been successful in the past when this comes to Guy Harvey. I think you guys have had really creative ideas when we've done it, kind of outside the box, not just let me start another nursing program, right? I mean, that's all the time. So I think that's one of the things, if I could just give you that, is continue to do what you've been successful in the past. As if we are going to ask for dollars, maybe ask for a grant first. If we don't get the grant, then let's look for a state dollar for a great program. That's all. I just want to be careful before you set out in the direction and saying, hey, we're not going to do any at all. Just know that, the legislature makes those rules when it comes to those appropriation items. The governor does have the final say, though, so.
Well, like the Lodge Center, estimated 16 million, we're asking for part of that. The other part could be the grant.
Right.
So it's kind of like a multi, funded type project, in my opinion. No, I don't want to take anything away from asking for appropriations, but I want to keep that open mind of going for the grant as well.
Yes, ma'am.
Right, okay.
I want to ask your opinion on, there was talk last year that we could almost expect to see someone try to introduce a bill for kindergarten to be at age 4. Have you heard that?
And I think that was me that stood up here and said this. My understanding was that the House Speaker was very interested in doing that, and it just didn't come through this year.
And you don't think it got support from enough people to come again?
I do not know, and I do know that House Speaker is out. So
Okay.
Yeah, it would have to be definitely the Speaker or the Senate President or Appropriations Chairman to propose that because of the funding impact.
Okay. But you look at what Soren said about their, the pre-K, these students meet 93% of the benchmarks. That's a real incentive for the legislature to fund pre-K better. Now out of our pocket, we're paying for full-day pre-K. But, so I would like to see that part of our legislative platform for expansion of pre-K funding.
The same as what it was last year with the Greater Florida Consortium, wasn't
Yeah.
it, right?
Right.
Yeah, keep it,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, but to me, that's a, and if we can show that our students are performing at 93% on benchmarks, that's incredible. So, okay.
Yep.
That's it.
Just for some clarity, when you say out of our pocket, are you meaning the parents? Because the parents pay for it to be full-day pre-K. The only kids that get full-day pre-K in Manatee County paid for completely is Title I students, which I imagine is the Title I dollars paying for the other half of that.
Okay.
Parents pay for the other half of that, just to complete the day.
Okay.
I just want to make sure.
And we want them, then we want more money from the state.
I'm with you on that. I just want to make sure there's clarity on that.
Okay,
Just for, I agree with you. I think there's a lot more discussion to have, and it probably needs to be held after we have the consortium meeting. I do recall in the past, though, the consortium does ask for like a raise in the BSA, and there have also been times in the past where we have put that on our legislative platform, and I do think that that's a better way to go about it. I do agree with you. Just, it, and I remember like the wording is very careful about like it needs to at least meet the rises in costs, but if we can get something over that, that's even better. But I'm sure that there'll be more of a discussion there where they might set a number and then we can match that number. But I do think we've done that before, and I think we should do that.
Mm-hmm.
I think that should be added in here. The only other thing I wanted to bring up is talking about grants versus appropriations, and going back to the Soren 4 lab.
Yes, ma'am.
I see no reason why we wouldn't ask for it. Because yes, would I like
As
it?
an appropriation?
Yes.
Agreed.
Because there's going to be costs to fund that we haven't really, like, we say we like it and we want to go fast. Great. I'm not against that, but there are costs to it. So if we can ask for it, I don't know why we wouldn't. I'm 100% in favor of doing that, and finding a way to ask for that, because it's would be unique. It truly benefits a lot of students, specifically the economically disadvantaged, but any family that wants to take advantage of it. And I just think that there's a lot that could be sold to the legislature to explain like how this really benefits so many kids. That I would.
Story, I say.
Yeah, you could tell a story real easy with that. That would really sell it.
We have the deck.
Yeah, well, you can't make it that long. You need one page, but still, there's a lot you could and pursue it. You know, I'm not saying wait necessarily. I don't know. There's a lot of different options, but we got to pursue that. So that's the only thing I want to make sure that is considered, and also the discussion about the BSA. I mean, I think at some point we'll have that number. We can come up with our own number if the greater consortium doesn't, but I think they always do. So.
Yes, they do.
Yeah.
So, and it's been here before, so if we can bring that over, I think that there's benefit to that.
You
That's
definitely want to keep the transportation in there again. Talking about increasing the BSA and tweak this a little bit, but I agree with you.
okay. That was all I had.
The other thing that so many districts now are having to go to the millage referendum,
Yes.
and to make up for what the state doesn't pay, and for them to make us go every 4 years out to the voters is just a recipe for disaster. And I would like that to be on our legislative priority too. I brought it up at the consortium last year, and they weren't keen on it, and I'm not really sure why, but
I think they thought it just wouldn't. How do I say this? I don't think they thought that was a winner. Like,
Right,
do you know what I
correct.
mean? Like,
They're gonna fight for stuff that-
They're going to tailor that so that they can have wins, right? Like, that's the whole
Because it
point,
was the
and
same
that's
time
not going to
that
be.
We were doing, or was that 2 years ago, that they did the making it on the general election?
General
It was that same election.
yeah,
Was-
that was 2 years ago, I think, but yeah, because you didn't.
But were
have
you
it-
asking them to add it that year?
I was asking, no, last.
Oh, this last year, okay.
And,
okay.
and I was the only
Almost
one
like
from
a
here that
tweaking
went.
that, okay.
Yeah, but I strongly believe that it's just a waste of time and effort, and the risk involved of it not passing is problematic. So I would like to see that on our platform.
I mean, the sales tax is 15 years, so,
Yeah.
Yeah. Mr. Tatum, did you have anything?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions, gentlemen. Welcome. Good to see you down here. Along with some of the things we're talking about, let me tack on to the millage thing real quickly. So in the budget briefing that we receive every year, and we're just going back into that process, we have somewhere between $55 million and $60 million of unfunded mandates and partially funded mandates. So that kind of goes along with what Ms. Foreman was saying, is that if we were able to fund all those mandates, if those mandates were funded, maybe we wouldn't have to go back and ask for so much millage from the citizens every year to kind of help out, because that's a deficit, you might say, that we have to take out of Hyde. So, but I brought that up recently in a meeting I was in to some people that work in this area, in the same area as you work in, lobbyists, and work with the legislator a lot. And one gentleman looked at me and he said, "That's a pipe dream. You'll never stop unfunded and partially funded mandates." But what are your thoughts on that? I mean, everything from transportation, which we get about 50% of the money that we need, to the new safety and security thing that came down, which who knows how much millions of dollars that might cost us. How do we go about making that point to the legislators that you're going to, and I'll talk about school funding or school building costs here in a second. We're coming, as I'm in this job now, I'm seeing that we're going to start to come close where the financial resources of the local districts are not going to be enough to do what the state keeps telling us we have to do. And so how do we get that point across to the legislature and then make them act on it?
Yeah.
Especially when I'm looking at I'll make one more comment. When I'm looking at this and it says, this is the focus on Florida's future, fiscal year 24-25, and like you said, It says Florida's total reserves are $17 billion, over 14.6% of the total budget. So if you've got all that tax money sitting in a big pot, and yet you're putting these unfunded mandates down on top of the local jurisdictions, it doesn't seem just, for lack of it. So I'll stop talking and let you
No,
answer.
listen, you asked a great question that we get every year. They know that we're not happy about unfunded mandates. They're not happy about unfunded mandates that come from the federal government,
Right.
and they talk about that quite greatly. I don't think it's going to stop. I think there's an unfortunate, they look at local governments because of prices and everything going up. They just think that we are overflown with money. And that is a perception that, local governments are overflowing with money. And so I would turn it around. I think that, yes, I'd love to go and say, let's stop the unfunded mandates, but it's not going to happen. But why don't we turn the conversation around on this? Why don't we look at districts like that are doing well and with efficiency? So if there's different efficiencies levels and we're doing well with the dollars that we have, then there should be some, like the carrot and the stick type thing. Like, don't just try to hit us, but kind of take care of those who are running a very efficient district. So that's my dream or wish that they would look at different districts and look at this one's doing trouble and we're going to give more money there. But what about the ones who have been doing good consistently and getting high grades? I'd love to see that turned around a little bit, because I don't think the unfunded mandates are going to stop. I think it, right? Right.
That's how they're paid, and we should be highly effective districts.
Right, highly effective districts. So I would turn that around, because I don't think the unfunded mandates are, again, and you're not going to change that perspective that they just, they look at us and we're flush with dollars, and and they know too, your sales tax is brought in higher than what it had expected, and so we've brought in more dollars with the 1/2-cent sales tax, or 1 pennies around the state too. So I don't know a better answer to give you than that, unfortunately.
But that's not it's just frustrating to hear that that's not the facts, that the legislators don't want to look at facts. They just have this false perception in their mind. For instance, so we'll talk about school funding here, school building funding. We're going to spend about $500 million in this county in the next 4 or 5 years to build 5 schools, is it, Dr. Weissong? Five? And we have to borrow $340 million of that, because even with our impact fees, our 1.5 mil, and our 1/2-cent sales tax, we still don't have enough money to do that. And basically, we fund that locally. We get very little, if any, money from the state, because the PICO money has gone away. So you look at the unfunded mandates that keep coming down, and then to the tune of $60 million in our district alone, and then you look at the fact we have to borrow $340 million of money in that. So the facts on the ground, and we're a pretty, I think, fiscally well-run district, just doesn't line up with their perception of things. But are you saying that there's no ability for the Florida Superintendents Association, the Florida School Board Association, I don't know what other organizations are out there, to sit down with the Education Committee chairman and some of these other Appropriations Committee chairman and say, look, this is not reality. You are asking, like, for instance, when you look at the proposition here on the Greater Florida Consortium of School Boards, number 2, restore the discretionary 2 mil levy. I mean, my perception in talking to citizens is that they're about up to here with taxes, and we go back to them and say, we want you to vote for the 1 mil, and now we're going to come back down and impose another 1/2 mil on top of you in building taxes. They're just, that's not going to fly. I don't know. I'm just wondering about why can't we factually show them that your perception that we're flush with cash is not the reality?
You're in and you're out. Year in and year out. We go to them every single time, and they're going to say, look at your district. Your district's going to get, this amount of money in the BSA. They're going to get $200 million more than they did last year. And then we show, but look at, this is the mandate that you just gave this. Here's the insurance rates that just got up. Here's the FRS that went up. So when I get down to it, you gave me $212 million, but I'm now at this negative, or I'm above only by 12. So unfortunately, they're only looking at the big number that's increased on the FFB, and they're told, look, education just got $1.1 billion more, $2.2 billion more. And again, I can do it in a very basic 6 form when I show them insurance and the same things year in and year out, we show them. Granted, they're giving us more, and they're looking at the additions that they've done to teachers and the salaries. But I will tell you, we're not going to stop. We're going to keep showing them. I mean, they know that the insurance is going up. They know that you've got the increases on your retirement. They know that your construction costs have gone up. But it sounds better to come back and say, hey, we just put $2.2 billion extra into the education system. In reality, that's barely even scratching the surface and not even keeping your head above water.
How about the discussion of trying to loosen up the SREF a little bit so that we can make charter schools and traditional public schools, building costs more in line with each other?
We had one guy that was willing to help us with that a couple years ago. It was when Wilton Simpson was the Senate president. We actually pressed and pushed those issues because I agree, not every single school had to be built to a standard, right? To a certain standard, just like the charter schools. And that was discussed again, but the gentleman that was the gentleman that was with us at the highest point in leadership was Wilton Simpson a couple years back, and then that's fell rest. We argued, we fought, we met with education staff in the House and the Senate and DOE. We even had a bill that was proposed to modify it, and it was dead on arrival.
Well, someone needs to try again, because like I said, of the $500 million that we need, we have to borrow
Right.
$340 million of it. And my perception, locally, anecdotally, is that the charter schools, now I know there's square footage and how big a classroom is and stuff, but they're 30–40% less to build than, if we could take the number from 500 million down to 300 million and only have to borrow 60 million instead of whatever. I'm doing public math, but borrow maybe 100 million instead of.
I agree with you. I think that should be one. You're right. I mean, I would love to see FSBA and all these, push that issue on SREF again, because very few really talk about it. Why? Because not every single county is growing, right? It's really the growing counties that deal with it the most, because you're the ones building the schools. But again, a county, above Levy and up in that area who only has to build one, does that one need it? Yes. Does every single school need to be met to that? No. And we've proved it to them time and time again. So I'd love to see that in there.
Yeah, the bigger point is that with the unfunded and partially funded mandates and the school costs rising, we're going to bankrupt ourselves in our local jurisdictions, and someone needs to get that message and understand it, because it's coming. And when you see you have to borrow $340 million of $500 million that you need to build schools,
I would say when we have our next legislative delegation, get up there and thank them again. But I just want to show you in the increases that you had very quickly. These are the 5 items that ate up 90% of it. It's a message they need to hear and continually hear.
I'll have one last question for you. I'm just more on a particular piece of legislation. What happened with the safety and security mandate, completely unfunded mandate that came down? You have to protect all these entrances to the schools. I talked to a couple House members, and I said, fine, if that's what you as our elected members decide to do to protect our schools, but you didn't send any money with it. And they said, yeah, sorry about that. They were joking and being facetious, but that's true. Like, did you not even think through what this was going to cost? How did this happen without some thoughtfulness put through and the implementation of it? And anyway, I'm just curious if you follow any of that.
I'm not sure. I'm going to look that bill up. I know Andrew's looking. If I don't have that information readily available, we'll make sure to get that.
But it basically says, it's the one that says anytime there's a student on campus, you have to guard all the entrances, not to the school, but to the school property, right? So.
Yeah, it's 1473. That's what I'm looking at. That bill did pass. I am just trying to look to see if that piece of it made it in the final version of the bill.
Yes, it did. Yeah, I mean
It's completely It's completely unworkable. It could possibly be very expensive, to the tune of millions of dollars a year, depending on, quote unquote, what the interpretation is. And the idea that it was just very frustrating because I brought this up to the FSBA back in January when they had their winter. They had a couple days in the legislature, and like, this is unworkable. It sounds good, but but the cost of it and the logistics of it are just not workable. Like, for instance, we have some local priorities that we would like to do with our money. We're buying the Evolve AI weapon detection systems. There are some schools that would like more protection in certain areas of their schools. They don't have it, and right now we're projecting it's going to take us decades to finish that. And so let us use our money locally. And like you said before, this school district doesn't need to build schools, this one does. Let us use our discretion locally to build up security rather than put these mandates. But I guess my bigger question was, it's so unworkable, and it's potentially very costly. I was just curious if you followed that, any of that discussion, and any of that stuff was brought up, or was it just, one legislator told me, look, anytime we're talking about safety and security after the unfortunate incident, down in the Parkland area, it just passes, and you don't throw up a hand and object because who wants to?
Yes, no to that answer. When that happened and we were changing the alert systems, they had a grant program available for every school district around the state. So they made sure that funding was available when you decided whether to do it on your phone and everything else.
It was just disappointed that it was just frustrating to see that wasn't, number one, thought through, like what are the consequences, the logistics of this, and number two, you have to send some funding with this if you're going to require it. Almost to the point where I've been sitting around and thinking about it. I mean, coming from a military background, it sounds like you want it to be guarded like a military base. All the there's a big fence around it, right, and there's 4 or 5 different entrances, but they're locked. And if they're not locked, there's a guard shack, and you drive through and you show a piece of ID, and that's how you get on a military base. I'm like, well, if that's what we want, then let's just create the Florida military, or not the military, but the Florida School Protection Force, or we activate the National Guard and have 3 or 4 of those guys on, activated, and it sounds facetious, but that's what we're getting to. Like, if you want it, it does sound to me like you want it guarded like a military base, and if that's what you want, then that's going to cost some money. I'm just bringing that up to you as it's more of a philosophical discussion, but it goes along with that unfunded mandate thing, and it really is going to create a hassle, and talking to the superintendent, a hassle for us academically during the school day. How are you going to man these doors? There's provisions in there that the teachers have to snitch on each other if they see that somebody else is violating the policies. I mean, it's a really bizarre bill that it's frustrating to see that it got through in the way that it did, and that thoughtful people didn't think through it a little better and understand the consequences it was going to have on our school systems. But I'll stop there venting. I vented. I got it out. So, okay, thanks.
I was going to say, you mentioned artificial intelligence, kind of off topic, but hopefully slightly positive. I believe there's a grant that went to the University of Florida, I think, and I've got to try to find it again, for schools that want to seek grant funding to implement artificial intelligence in the classroom.
Okay.
So that's a few bucks. Sorry.
Yeah, that could be a possibility. Go ahead.
Maybe we could just end by Sean and Andrew telling us where our delegation stands. I know Senator Boyd is up for potentially being the next president, and so maybe you can lay out when that would be, potentially what our other senator, Senator Gruters, what committee maybe he would be. I know he could have been the chair of appropriations, but where that stands, and then we obviously Representative Beltran and Representative Gregory have left, so there'll be 2 seats there. But then, but we do have Representative McFarland and Robinson. So
absolutely,
maybe you could just kind of give us what the outlook may be on our delegation.
Absolutely. So as you know or you don't know, committees change every 2 years. So when a new Senate president or speaker is put in place, all those change, and generally the chairs change also. So right now we basically know this. We know who the new Senate president is coming in is Senator Albritton. 2 years after that will be your Senator Jim Boyd. At this point, the Speaker of the House coming in is going to be Danny Perez from South Florida. So you're going to have one gentleman from Central Florida, another one from South Florida. So those regions are changing. And then you have Jim Boyd, and then you have, oh my gosh, I went brain dead. No, in the House after Danny Perez. Garrison, so sorry, Sam Garrison, up near Jacksonville area. We don't know any of the other chairs except for those who are going to be appropriations chairmen, who they've kind of let that out. Nothing is official until 2 to 3 weeks after the election. So what happens is a new state rep, or even current state reps, when the change happens in Senate presidency or speaker, they put in what they would like to be on what committee. That time, it's chosen to where their office is going to be, their parking spots, and everything else. So unfortunately, right now, we don't know who those chairs are, so it makes it kind of hard to have those conversations like we've had in years past. Like, hey, we're going to run and we're going to go do this. We're able to do that with committee staff, just not who the chair of the committees are going to be at that time.
And based on that information, Ms. Foreman, you had mentioned speaking with the CFO down in Miami. with a House Speaker coming in from Miami, you want to look at your friends on your various school boards throughout the state who are geographically located where leadership is coming in, and work with them. And we're happy to help you do that. Like when I think of Miami, we know the person and the legislative person. Same with Jacksonville. So working with those boards to get them to adopt some of your priorities as well, and have them, because they're closest to leadership, quite literally, that might be a helpful strategy.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you guys. It's an
Appreciate
honor
y'all.
to represent you.
And I'm sure we'll be in contact in the next several months as we get through the Great Consortium and then more of our stuff. So appreciate the update, and thank you all very much.
Thank you.
All right.
Very much, guys.
Awesome, guys, thanks.
Thank you, guys.
All right, board, with that, concludes our workshop. We're off next week. Nothing next week going on. 4th of July. Everybody have a happy 4th of July next week. And we'll see you in a couple weeks. We're adjourned.